Chapter 1248. Several days later, the 6 beast saints gathered at the highest cliff of the eastern barren coast, the Chong Shao Ridge. The ring-pupil great sage looked around and said, "Is it just me? No more?" Cha Qingyi said, "It's just us." It was not that he did not want to gather more people, but the eastern wasteland was too vast, and the ancient demon and great sage lived far away from each other. Even these people in front of him had to rely on the doppelgangers he had planted in various places in the past to find them. This was the most people he could find in a short time. Even if he had another month or two, he wouldn't be able to find another one. At this time, a great monster saint who looked like a cloud of smoke said, "I heard that the people from outer space came on a big fish. Where is it now? Can Great Saint Panjin deal with it?" As soon as he said this, the others stared at him. They didn't want to move until they figured out what was going on. Cha Qingyi smiled. He knew very well that these beast saints wouldn't have thought of this before they came. They must have a way to deal with it. The reason why they didn't mention it before and only mentioned it now was not because they wanted to retreat, but because they wanted to make things difficult for him or fight for the position of the leader. But how could he not be prepared? He waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, everyone. Before I came out, I went to Mount Taigong to ask for a divination. I was told that I won't be disturbed by the big fish." Mount Taigong? Great Saint Panjin went there. The monsters were a little surprised. There was a Taigong stone near the sea in the Eastern Barren. It was said that it had been there since the world was created. What was strange was that as long as someone offered a sacrifice, it could be divined. But some things could be answered, while others could not be answered no matter how much they asked. Ring Pupil Saint said, "Great Saint Panjin, did you ask? Did our trip go smoothly?" Cha Qingyi shook his head. "It's not that we didn't ask, but we offered a lot of sacrifices, but the Taigong stone never responded." The beast saints heard this and sighed inwardly. It wasn't because they didn't get an answer, but because of the sacrifices that were wasted. Cha Qingyi seemed to know what they were thinking, and couldn't help but feel a bit of disdain. He secretly cursed them for being short-sighted, but he also knew. And because of that, these few people were moved by him. He said, "Everyone, as long as we can save Shu Yiyang, don't tell me we can't get any benefits? Let's not talk about anything else. Just the blood quartz stone vein in Shu Yiyang's possession would be more than enough for us to enjoy." The demon's breathing became heavy. The bloodstone vein was a blood medicine bestowed by the great sage Qin Pai. It was rumored that it contained the blood essence of the demonic ancestor, and every child of the demonic king had one. If he could get a share, it would be even easier to condense his blood qi. Cha Qingyi coughed, bringing the ancient monsters back to their senses. Then he pointed to a certain direction and said, "Everyone, please look. The cloud in the sky is where the person from beyond the heavens is." The demons looked up and saw the sky full of stars, shining brightly in the night sky. However, where Xie Qingyi was pointing, a large part of the sky was covered by a cloud. The smoke-like ancient demon spoke again, "Shall we go up now?" Cha Qingyi smiled and shook his head. "Great Sage Tanxiang, that won't work. A few days ago, I sent a few lesser demons to test it out, but they found that there was an invisible barrier outside the cloud. Later on, we forced them to dive in, but they were crushed to pieces in an instant." The demons were shocked, and one of them asked, "What's going on?" Cha Qingyi thought for a moment, then said, "Perhaps there's some kind of defensive magic. In the mountain and sea realm, not to mention the great sage ancient monsters, even the 100 kingdoms of the eastern wastelands. They had never come into contact with things like formations and restrictions, so they naturally couldn't understand it." The great sage ring pupil frowned. "Even if we can get through, won't we alarm those people from beyond the heavens?" Cha Qingyi said, "That's right. Since we can't force our way through, we'll just have to think of another way." The great sage Tan Xiang said mockingly, "What way? Don't tell me you want them to open the door and let us in?" Cha Qingyi laughed and said, "Why not?" The great sage ring pupil said, "What does the great sage Pan Jing want to do?" Cha Qingyi said, "There's a group of people at the foot of the mountain. They were the envoys of the Fuxiang country in the west, but they were intercepted by me. We can blend in with them like the envoys of the East Wilderness and Shunfang country." The Fuxiang country was a big country in the west. In fact, when the cultivators of the 9 continents arrived, they had already sent out their envoys. However, because the journey was too long, they only got out of the 100 lands after flying for a month. Unexpectedly, they were ambushed by the great sage Pan Jing and his people. Other than the palace master who managed to escape, the rest were all turned into his people by him using a secret magic. The great sage of incense snorted and said, "Servants and servants can listen to your orders, but it's inexcusable for a nation's envoy to not have a great mystic cultivator. How are you going to resolve this, great sage of Panjing?" Cha Qingyi smiled mysteriously and said, "That's not difficult. Everyone, please take a look at this." He opened his palm, and there were dozens of colorful cinnabar pills on it. Someone immediately recognized it. Incarnation powder. Cha Qingyi said, "That's right. After consuming this powder, we can conceal our qi dynamic and look no different from a mystic cultivator from the inside out." The great sage Tan Xiang questioned, "The body can be changed, and the qi dynamic can be concealed, but the appearance can't be changed at will. Among the 100 lands of the East Wilderness, the great mystic cultivators all know each other, and there are envoys from the other 2 countries. Aren't they afraid of being recognized?" Cha Qingyi said confidently, "While the envoys from the other 2 countries can recognize every great mystic cultivator, they don't necessarily know every disciple of the Duke. If I have just become a great mystic cultivator just now, how can they tell? As for those people from beyond the sky, there's even less to worry about. At least for the time being, they won't have to worry about being seen through. As long as we blend in with them, we can openly search for the whereabouts of the great sage Yeung." He loosened the powder and said, "Everyone, after consuming this medicine, we will truly be the envoys from the kingdom of Fuxiang." An ancient demon called the great sage Xiuzhang was the first to reach out and grab a handful. He sighed and said, "So the great sage Panjing has such a trick up his sleeve. That makes things much easier." Cha Qingyi smiled and said, "Before you came here, did you think that I would barge in by force? Although I have some skills, I won't do such a stupid thing before I understand the situation." The few ancient demons present understood that he clearly had a good plan, but he did not explain it to them. He was obviously afraid that the news would leak out. However, no one was going to argue with him now. As long as it was really possible to succeed, this was just a small matter. They consumed the powder, and in a short while, the sound of bones cracking could be heard. All of them had shed their demon forms and turned into human forms. Moreover, their qi dynamic was concealed. If they did not deliberately activate their blood qi, they would only look like ordinary mystic cultivators. Cha Qingyi consumed the powder as well. However, he was going to impersonate a great mystic cultivator, so the effect of the medicine was much lighter. He did not let go of any details. He took out the clothes that he had prepared long ago and let the demons change into them. He also specially instructed them not to speak unless there was an emergency and that he would handle everything. When he saw that the demons were getting impatient, he did not waste any more time and blew a whistle towards the bottom of the cliff. After tens of breaths, a giant eagle that was 1,000 feet in size flew up the cliff. There were already more than 100 people standing on the back of the eagle. When they saw Cha Qingyi, they bowed together and said, "Greetings, Grand Palace Master." Cha Qingyi smiled and waved his sleeves. "Dispense with the formalities." He leaped onto the back of the eagle and said, "Everyone, please come up." The 5 great demons looked at each other and each of them leaped up. Cha Qingyi whistled again. This huge eagle spread its wings and flew up with the wind. After a short while, it was already near that ball of fog. He put his hands together and bowed. "Envoy from the kingdom of Fuxiang Mo Chong is here under the orders of His Majesty to pay a visit to the expert from beyond the heavens." After a while, a passage appeared in the fog. Cha Qingyi hurried, and the huge eagle successfully flew into it. Ring Pupil Demon King and the other 4 were delighted. They did not expect that this method would actually work. However, they remembered the previous instructions. They did not say a word and mixed in with the many servants, soldiers, and envoys. They were not very conspicuous. At this moment, Mengjin received the news that another envoy had arrived. However, it was different from when he first arrived. He already knew that although the kingdom of Fuxiang was considered a big country, there were only 2 great mystic cultivators in the country. There was no need for him to greet them personally. He was about to ask his disciples to greet them on his behalf when the bronze bell on the eaves of the hall shook violently. His expression changed slightly. This was the good and evil bell of the heaven-patching formation map. Anyone who entered the formation map would ring if they had evil thoughts or enmity. However, in the 9 continents, even if they were enemies, no one would rashly barge in before breaking the outer restriction. This was because in this formation map, even a disciple with weak mana could use the massive power of the formation to suppress external enemies. He lifted his eyes and looked towards the entrance of the formation door. In an instant, Cha Qingyi and the rest felt like they were enveloped by an aura that was as deep as the ocean. Other than Cha Qingyi, whose expression did not change, the 5 ancient demons unknowingly felt their blood qi shake, but they quickly restrained it. Meng Zhen was a nascent core venerable, and his senses were extremely sharp. Although there was only a trace of that ferocious aura, it was unusually eye-catching, like a piece of white paper dyed with ink. He stroked his beard and thought. He summoned a Taoist child and instructed, "Order Zhou Xian to greet these people. If necessary, allow him to use the power of the formation." The Taoist child obeyed and left. About half an hour later, Zhou Xian arranged for Cha Qingyi and the others to enter the guest house. Although he already knew that these people had other motives, his expression was as usual, without any abnormalities. When Cha Qingyi first entered this place, everything he saw and heard were all novel things. He was also amazed. However, he couldn't care about this now. After getting familiar with Zhou Xingyuan, he asked, "Spiritual Master Zhou, I've heard that the emissary from the Eastern Barren Kingdom gifted you an ancient demon called Great Sage Yeong. Is it true?" Zhou Xian smiled. "Why, are you interested in this demon?" Cha Qingyi chuckled. "It's not that I have such an intention. It's just that His Majesty heard that this demon's feathers are beautiful and wanted to take a look. As a subject, I have to fulfill His Majesty's wish. If possible, I'm willing to exchange goods for this demon." Zhou Xian said, "I can't make the decision on this matter. However, this demon is a gift from the Eastern Barren Kingdom to my sect master. I'm afraid it's difficult for you to fulfill your wish." Cha Qingyi showed a regretful expression. "If that's the case, can I take one of this demon's feathers back? This way I can account for it." Zhou Xian seemed to hesitate, then said, "This is a small matter. Tomorrow I can bring you along." Cha Qingyi put on a grateful expression and said, "Thank you, fellow Taoist." Chapter 1249. On the second day, Zhou Xian came to the guest house early in the morning and said, "I have already informed my teacher. I can now bring you to the place where Great Sage Yeong is imprisoned." Cha Qingyi put his hands together and thanked him. He then asked sincerely, "Are there any rules for this trip? Do I need to prepare some gifts?" Zhou Xian smiled and said, "It doesn't matter. I am a cultivator and do not care about such things." Cha Qingyi could not help but nod and said, "I have worried too much." Zhou Xian looked around the room and said casually, "Do these 5 want to go with you?" At this moment, the 5 demon sages were sitting there motionlessly. From the beginning to the end, they did not say a word. If the people of the 100 countries of the eastern wastelands saw this, they might find it strange. But outsiders who did not know the inside story would only think that they were strictly adhering to some rules of the country of Fuxiang. Cha Qingyi hurriedly said, "These are the disciples of the Duke. They want to see what the Great Sage Yeong looks like. Oh, if it is not convenient, you can go alone." Zhou Xian smiled and said, "How is it not convenient? You are exaggerating." He looked at the 5 people again and his gaze revealed some inexplicable meaning. He then said, "You and these few people can come with me." After leaving the guest house, Zhou Xian took out a talisman and shook it. A golden light floated and turned into a golden boat. A look of surprise flashed across Cha Qingyi's eyes and he asked with some urgency, "Fellow Taoist, what is this?" His eagerness was not an act. When he first saw an artifact, he immediately recognized its benefits. Not only him, but the few great sage ancient demon sages were also shocked. Zhou Xian said indifferently, "It is just a small artifact. If you like it, I will order someone to give you one later." Cha Qingyi revealed a look of joy and took a step back. He put his palms together and bowed, saying, "I dare not accept it. But if His Majesty knows about this, he will definitely like it. I wonder if I can exchange it with other things?" Zhou Xian said, "I will only know about this after asking His Majesty. You do not need to be anxious. You will know after a few days." Cha Qingyi bowed and said, "Then I will have to trouble you." Zhou Xian immediately rejected him. After exchanging a few pleasantries, he led the 6 people onto the flying boat. With a shake of the talisman, the boat soared into the sky and plunged into the sea of clouds. The 5 demons kept looking at the various decorations on the flying boat with greed in their eyes. Each of them had their own plans. Great Sage Tan Xiang's eyes flickered. He thought to himself, "If I can get my hands on this thing, I won't have to waste my mana when I fly. If I can get a dozen of them, I can carry thousands of people. By then, where can I not go? I can even collect more offerings." Unlike them, Cha Qingyi did not think too much about the Dharma instruments. Instead, he observed the surroundings and memorized the route. However, he soon discovered that this method was useless. In this domain, all the flying islands and floating peaks were moving all the time. If one was not familiar with them, it would be impossible to even figure out the direction. So he quickly gave up on this idea. After traveling for about half an hour, the group arrived before a cliff. There was a huge rock that was a few acres in size. Zhou Xian slowly landed the flying boat and pointed to a stone door not far away. "The big demon is locked up here. Everyone, please go ahead." Cha Qingyi asked cautiously, "Fellow Taoist, are you not going to enter with us?" Zhou Xian smiled faintly and said, "I have already seen it a month ago. Also, do you think that the demon can escape?" Cha Qingyi's heart skipped a beat. He unconsciously averted his gaze and lowered his head, saying, "Then I will enter." Zhou Xian said casually, "Then I will wait here for you." Cha Qingyi clasped his hands and bowed to him. He turned and walked towards the stone door. The 5 ancient demons followed behind him. After pushing the door open, the 6 of them entered one by one. They walked down a narrow stone staircase. After walking for a while, they passed 2 yin-yang doors. Soon he arrived at a vast cavern. Cha Qingyi saw the great sage Yang, who was tied up by the thick golden chain, at a glance. He saw that there was no one guarding the surroundings, but he was not sure if there was any magical power that could spy on them, so he did not dare to directly expose his identity. Instead, he walked forward and casually praised. At the same time, he transmitted his voice, "Is it possible for Lady Shu to hear what I'm saying?" When the great sage Yang heard this, his eyes immediately opened and stared straight at him. Cha Qingyi saw her expression and felt relieved. He knew that she was probably fine. He reminded her secretly, "I have sneaked in this time. I hope that Lady Shu will not reveal any flaws." The great sage Yang also learned his lesson. He secretly looked left and right and returned to his original appearance. He only opened his eyes slightly. Cha Qingyi said, "I am the envoy from the country of Fuxiang. His Majesty has admired Lady Shu for a long time. This time, I was ordered to come here and wanted to ransom Lady Shu. However, I could not do so. Therefore, I can only take one of Lady Shu's feathers back to comfort myself. I hope Lady Shu will not be offended." In private, he sent a telepathic message, "I'm Xie Qingyi, originally from the northern heavens Hanyuan. More than 1,000 years ago, during the expedition against the great sage Chu Lian, I once served the great sage Green Melon. This time, I heard that the lady was captured, so I specially came to rescue her. However, the defenses are tight, so I might not be able to do as I wish. If I fail, Lady Shu has some keepsake. I can go to the north and pass it to the great sage Qing Pai." The great sage Yang hesitated for a long time. He shook his body and a long feather floated down from his tail. He said, "Take it? Can you do as you wish?" Cha Qingyi took the feather and kept it. He said, "Lady Shu, just wait here. We will do our best to rescue you." He signaled with his eyes. The 5 ancient demons were hesitant. One of them even wanted to break into the prison. However, after thinking about it, they did not dare to be rash. They followed him out. When they were outside, Cha Qingyi thanked Zhou Xian and returned to the guest house on the flying boat. After the 5 of them returned to the guest house and closed the door, the great sage Tan Xiang could not help but ask, "Cha Qingyi, just now, the opportunity is right in front of you. Why don't you rescue the great sage Yang?" Cha Qingyi said calmly, "Those people from beyond the heavens have imprisoned the great sage Yang there. How can they not be prepared? The great sage Tan Xiang is thinking too simply." The great sage Tan Xiang sneered, "There are only a few children with no supernatural powers. While Zhou Xian's aura is much stronger than that of the spiritualized mystic cultivators, it is still weaker than any of us. How can we not win?" Cha Qingyi said, "I am not afraid of him. I am wary of someone else." Cha Qingyi said in a deep voice, "Have you all forgotten the aura that enveloped us after we entered this place?" The expressions of all the demons changed. That aura was like a mountain or an ocean, and in that instant, it seemed to have pressed down upon them to the point of suffocation. Even now, they still shuddered with fear when they thought about it. The person behind that person was absolutely not someone they could go against. Cha Qingyi looked at the crowd and said, "We have just arrived. These people from beyond the heavens must be wary. If we want to make a move, we will have to wait a few days." He turned his head and looked at the great sage Huantong. "Gao Huantong, you can recognize the path. I wonder if you have memorized it?" The great sage Huantong said in a deep voice, "Don't worry." Cha Qingyi looked at a person wearing a golden crown and said, "Great sage Jin Huan, also, that chain is not simple. Can you remove it?" The great sage Jin Huan said coldly, "As long as it is of the metal attribute, my supernatural power can remove it." The great sage Jin Huan turned to another monster saint and said solemnly, "Whether we can escape or not depends on you, great sage Wu Jiang." The human form that great sage Wu Jiang transformed into was as short as a child. He said in a soft voice, "As long as this place can communicate with the outside world, I can move you all out." Cha Qingyi smiled, "That is easy. Just send one person to leave first. We can make our move when the people from beyond the heavens open the mist." Over the next few days, Cha Qingyi was like a real envoy of a country, visiting everywhere. Among them, he met with the people of Eastern Wasteland and Shenfang once, but no one saw through his identity. 7 days later, under the urging of the demons, he finally made up his mind. First, he found an excuse to send a servant outside the formation. Then, the 6 of them used the supernatural power of the altar incense great sage to conceal themselves. Then, with the great sage Huan Tong leading the way, it only took them 15 minutes to reach the outside of the cliff prison. However, when they reached the bottom and saw the situation, their expressions changed. Zhou Xian stood there with his hands behind his back and smiled, "I have waited for you all for a long time. You are finally here." The demons knew something was wrong. The great sage Tan Xiang shouted, "He is just a spiritual mystic cultivator. Kill him." Cha Qingyi sighed. He did not know when he was exposed. However, he had no other choice but to attack together with the demons. The original bodies of the 6 demon saints were thousands of feet tall. If they were to appear, each of them would be able to topple mountains and shatter the land. However, Zhou Xian snorted and said, "You overestimate yourself." Boom! An incomparably huge array force surged from all directions. In just an instant, it had suppressed the blood and divine abilities of these demons. They were still in their human forms, and were firmly locked on the ground, unable to move at all. However, right at this moment, the cyan-clothed bodies suddenly shattered, turning into countless ashes that fell to the ground. Zhou Xian frowned and said, "Doppelganger?" At the same time, somewhere in the eastern wasteland, there was a huge ancient tree. There was a huge fruit on its branch, and at this moment, it fell to the ground with a plop. A completely drenched and naked person rolled out from it. Cha Qingyi stood up from the ground with a pale face. His real body was a wood leech. He was born with supernatural power that allowed him to have thousands of doppelgangers. This time, The doppelganger that went to the heaven-patching formation was one of his more important doppelgangers. Losing it also hurt his vitality. Long before he encouraged the other 5 demons, he had already thought of a plan. He would save this great sage Yang if he could, but if he couldn't, he would only lose a doppelganger. At least his real body would be fine. However, he did not come out empty-handed. He had gathered a lot of information about the people from beyond the sky. He could send it to the Green-Ing demon to claim credit. However, the distance was far, so he could only rely on the doppelgangers he planted long ago to send the information one by one. He should be able to send the information within a month. Thousands of miles away, a greenwood doppelganger had already received a strand of consciousness and sent it to the next doppelganger. Then it went all the way to the north. At the same time, the heaven-patching formation that stayed in the sky for a month moved. It turned into the clouds and moved towards the northern cold abyss. Chapter 1250. After a few days, the sky-piercing formation had gradually arrived at the edge of the northern border of the eastern wastelands through continuous teleportation. Xiao Shamshang Yen sat cross-legged in the main hall alone, as if he was in a state of tranquility. A figure flashed at the entrance of the hall, and Jing Yu entered. He carefully came behind him and bowed. "Master, we're almost at the heaven capital gate." Zhang Yan opened his eyes. With just a sense of his mind, the undulating earth below him immediately entered his sight. The northern cold abyss they were heading towards was above the earth, and at the border between the eastern wastelands and it, there was a sturdy rock that stretched for hundreds of millions of miles, towering into the clouds like a city wall. This place was called Songhan Mountain. At the highest point of the mountain, there was a large stone gate. There was a flat and wide path in the middle that was enough for an army to pass through. This was built 9,000 years ago by the divine kingdom of eastern wastelands to make it convenient for them to fight against the demons and beasts in the north. The countries of the divine kingdom of eastern wastelands called it the heaven capital gate. Only after passing through this gate could one be considered to have stepped into the northern cold abyss. After looking for a while, he said, "Go and invite the Duke of the Eastern Wastelands here." Jing Yu said, "I'll go and invite him now." After a long while, Gong Shizao came into the main hall. He put his palms together and bowed. "Greetings, master." This time, he didn't feel the great chi of blood on Zhang Yan's body. His tense mind couldn't help but relax, and he felt that he wouldn't be as embarrassed as last time. Zhang Yan raised his hand and said, "Fellow Taoist, please sit. I have a few things to ask you." Gong Shizao said, "I wouldn't dare." He bowed again and carefully sat down on a seat at the side. Zhang Yan waved his sleeve, and as his transcendence energy surged, the entire surface of the main hall seemed to suddenly disappear. What appeared was the vast earth below. Gong Shizao saw the towering stone gate that was as tall as a mountain and seemed to be filled with the vicissitudes of time. He cried out in surprise, "Heaven Capital Gate?" Zhang Yan said, "Fellow Taoist Gong, I heard that this stone gate was built during the divine kingdom of eastern wastelands?" Gong Qian let out a long sigh. According to historical records, hundreds of years after the divine kingdom of the East Wasteland was founded, the extermination bird, lotus heart butterfly, and mountain sun ghost joined hands to head south because they threatened the many demons and beasts in the northern cold abyss. You want to scatter God Nation? When the God Nation heard of this news, the 3 high priests led 68 great mystic cultivators and 400,000 mystic cultivators to build this gate of divine capital in advance and used it as an important pivot. I drew the ground with runic symbols and blood and cast the art of absolute heaven-forbidding art to leave only one entrance and block the demons outside Songhan Mountain's sky capital. In this battle, the God Nation's combat power was almost at its full strength. However, the God Nation had just been established, and the people's hearts were united. Even after fighting for more than 10 years, we still haven't taken half a step back. The 3 tribes saw that they couldn't do anything, so they made an agreement with the 3 high priests. As long as the divine nation's sacrificial vessels are not damaged and the slaughterhouse is not destroyed, they will not invade the eastern wasteland. At this point, Gong Qianzhao's expression was a little gloomy. After the collapse of the God Nation, although the three tribes didn't make any big moves on the surface due to the agreement, they kept making moves in the dark. For example, the great sage Yi Yang. He was the chess piece that the great sage Qing Pai placed in the eastern wasteland. This demon often led a group of demons to attack cities and ask for sacrifices. Among them, the eastern wasteland suffered the most. If not for that, he wouldn't have thought of trapping him this time. Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Your country's Tao of runes can seal the heavens and lock the earth. It's quite ingenious." Gong Qianzhao sighed and said, "Runes have been passed down until now. Although it hasn't been cut off, there are many powerful rune techniques that require many precious materials. However, the lands that produce these precious materials are not in my hands now. Even if there is a technique, if we don't try to recover the lost land, it won't be of much use." Zhang Yan asked, "I wonder what kind of precious materials were used to block the 10,000 demons?" Gong Qianzhao said, "The precious materials are ordinary, but when they were drawing the runes, the three great priests cut their skin and cut out their flesh. They sprinkled their own blood on the runes, and the entire Tsonghan mountain turned red. It's said in history that the aura of the blood runes could frighten ghosts and gods, covering the sky and earth. Many demons couldn't even take half a step forward." Jing Yu, who was listening on the side, was also secretly shocked. With just the blood of 3 people, they were actually able to dye this mountain range that spanned millions of miles. This kind of ability was indeed remarkable. Clang! Zhang Yan thought about it in his heart. Although he couldn't personally witness the 3 great priests' divine abilities and arcane powers, the amount of spiritual vigor they could attract must have reached an unusually large level, judging from how much blood and qi they had. At that time, the 3 great demon tribes had the upper hand, so it was obvious that they had the upper hand. Now, it was unknown how much strength they had left. However, even if they were at their peak, as long as they dared to block the path of the cultivators of the 9 continents, they would still have to face them. Gong Qianzhao saw that they were about to pass over the celestial capital gate and looked down at the slightly dark red ground below. He could not help but say with emotion, "In the past, most of the mystic warriors of the God Nation died here. Along with them, there were also an uncountable number of demons and foreign species. Under the watering of this blood, a blood-worm demon was born here after 1,000 years. As long as it saw any living thing, it would swallow them all. Not only our God Nation suffered from it, even the demons of the cold abyss were slaughtered. Later, our great priest Tuo joined hands with the 3 demon kings of the God Nation, and just now, they severely injured it." Zhang Yan saw that Gong Qianzhao was only mentioning Gong Tuo just now. The other 2 great priests seemed to have disappeared, so he asked, "Since there are 3 great priests in the God Nation, why didn't the other 2 fight against this demon?" Gong Qianzhao was stunned and said awkwardly, "I don't know about this either. It's all because there's no record on the historical brush." Zhang Yan's eyes flickered. When he asked this question just now, although there was no change in Gong Qianzhao's expression, there was a slight change in his qi dynamic. Obviously, he was not telling the truth. However, according to logic, with the supernatural power of the 2, their lifespans should not have ended after 1,000 years. If it wasn't because of some accident that prevented them from fighting, then they must have ascended. It was just that it was not a big deal to say such a thing. However, this person was being secretive about it. There must be a reason behind it. However, he had no intention of telling the truth, so he did not press him. At this moment, he thought of the demon that just now was talking about. His heart moved slightly, and he used his spirit to sweep towards the underground. However, after 10 breaths, he suddenly felt a strange qi dynamic lingering under the ground. It was extremely turbid and rotten. He could not help but raise his brows and said, "There is indeed a demon hiding under the mountain. If that qi dynamic is at its peak, it is indeed powerful." Gong Qianzhao's expression changed. He said, "This demon is really still here?" Zhang Yan glanced at him and said, "This thing's vitality seems to be greatly damaged. It won't come out for a while. Fellow Taoist, you don't have to worry." Gong Qianzhao, however, was slightly uneasy. This bloodworm had almost no weakness. If it really came out, it would probably find the Eastern Barren Kingdom first. Even if they had Boyu City, they would not be able to deal with this kind of demon that was everywhere. He hesitated for a moment and tried to ask, "May I ask Shangjin, when will this demon come out again?" "Zhang Yan, if there are no accidents, we don't have to worry for at least 1,000 years. Gong Qianzhao still frowned. 1,000 years was not long, but it was not short either. He might not be able to see that day, but the descendants of the Gong family would not be able to escape. At this moment, a thought appeared in his mind. These people from beyond the heavens are powerful and have unfathomable methods. When the time comes to fight against this demon, we might have to rely on this group of people. At this moment, the heaven patching formation absorbed enough spiritual vigor. With a turn, it left Songhan Mountain far behind. In the field of vision, there was only a long shadow left. When Gong Qianzhao saw this, he could not help but reveal a burning look in his eyes. He praised, "Shangjin's method is really unimaginable." When Zhang Yan heard his words, he changed his mind and said, "Fellow Taoist Gong, the Eastern Barren Kingdom is so vast. 10,000 years ago, how did the cities of your god nation travel to and fro?" Gong Qianzhao said seriously, "In those days the god nation relied on the cloud whales. Although they are demons, their intelligence is similar to that of humans. That year, the Whale King made a promise with the 3 high priests. As long as they offer enough offerings, they will help me move. 7,000 years ago, there were hundreds of thousands of cloud whales serving my god nation. They were spread across all the states and tribes. But after the death of High Priest Gong Tua, he could not afford to support so many, so they all went their separate ways." Zhang Yan was a little interested and asked, "Are there still these cloud whales today?" Gong Qianzhao said, "Yes, there are a few in the northern cold abyss. But their tribe originally lived in the western desolate domain. If Shangjin wants to control them, I'm afraid we will have to look for them here." Zhang Yan nodded. The mountain and sea realm was really too vast. There were countless strange creatures and strange demons. In such a remote place, there might be some powerful demon hiding. At this time, Jing Yu came over and said, "Master, just now, Reverend Wen sent a letter saying that among the 6 demons, there is a soul that has not been destroyed. He should have a clone outside. Perhaps he has already sent word of our situation here. He asked if we can try to capture him." Zhang Yan said indifferently, "No problem. It's good that Green Nightmare Demon King has received the news. Let's give him some time to gather more people. When the time comes, we can kill him all at once. It will save us a lot of trouble in the future." What the 6 demons saw were mostly unimportant matters. The emissaries of the Eastern Wastelands and Shun Fang also knew about it. If they wanted to use this information to determine the combat strength of the cultivators of the 9 states, they could only come up with some specious conclusions. At this time, Zhang Yan looked down and saw that under his feet was a vast and boundless lake. There were many islands dotted around it. Because it was high above the 6 continents, it looked like a void. He said, "It is indeed worthy of the 2 words northern sky." Gong Xianzhao said, "There is a saying among the 100 countries of the Eastern Wastelands. If one day, Songhan collapses, the water of northern sky will pour down and drown the 3 territories and 4 regions." Hearing this, Zhang Yan nodded and thought to himself, "This should be the place where my Qinsong school will be established." He turned and asked with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Gongxian, based on your current speed, how long do you think it will take to reach the cold Jade Ocean continent?" Gong Xianzhao judged for a moment and said, "I have never been to the cold Jade Ocean continent. However, when the 3 demon tribes went south, they traveled day and slept at night. It took them about 100 years to reach the outskirts of Songhan Mountain. Based on your flying speed, at least a month, at least 100 days. I think you should be able to reach there." Chapter 1251. About 20 days later, the heaven patching formation had gradually reached the depths of the northern freezing abyss. Here, from time to time, one could see violent waves and tsunamis thousands of feet high, as well as violent hurricanes that could engulf everything. In addition to cultivating, Zhang Yan had been observing the changes in this area. He could tell that cultivators below the Jindan stage could not resist the power of nature. Only the Yuanying cultivators could come and go without any hindrance. However, above this vast ocean, there were also countless continents, mountains, and rivers, which were natural barriers to the huge waves and storms. Because there was a pattern to it, as long as one was familiar with the changes, they could find a way to avoid it. This was not a big problem for the cultivators of the 9 provinces. When the Qinsong school occupied this place, they could gather everyone to use their magical power, set up a great restrictive formation, and light up the spirit points to absorb the boundless power for their own use. At this moment, the formation outside the heaven-patching pavilion trembled slightly, and it could be seen that a streak of blood energy was knocked away. Zhang Yan glanced at it and no longer paid attention to it. On the way here, he had already encountered this kind of thing more than 10 times. According to what Gong Sun Zhao said, every single greater demon here would smear their blood on the outside of a territory they occupied. Not only was this to delineate their territory, it was also for the sake of deterring their enemies. Most importantly, they were able to rely on their blood qi to suppress violent winds and enormous waves, so if someone were to fly in the sky, it would immediately alarm them. As for ordinary demons, they did not dare to go near the place where the demons were, not to mention flying in the sky. Even if they tried to force their way in, they would immediately be chased down by the blood energy. However, the heaven-patching formation was different. It was originally a great formation of a mountain gate. As long as the spiritual opportunity was not exhausted, even if it was surrounded by several Taoist paradises, it would not be broken in a short period of time. Only a bit of blood energy could not be considered a hindrance. At this moment, the demon below also felt that something was wrong. Those who could call themselves kings in the northern freezing abyss were not simple characters. Just by looking at the huge fog created by the heaven-patching pavilion, he knew that it was not something he could deal with. He hid in the cave motionlessly, not daring to come out at all. After another 3 days, below them, another area appeared, but it was completely different from the cold and desolate scene before. In the misty fog, the shadow of the green mountain was faintly discernible. Near the island, spirit cliffs towered into the sky, waterfalls rumbled, and clouds and mist rose into the sky. Within the eyes of the eye, the entire mountain was verdant and filled with fragrant flowers and rare grasses, causing it to seem like an otherworldly paradise. This place was called the Great Sky Continent, and it was a rare paradise in the northern heaven frigid abyss. Because there was a huge mountain on the outside, the wind and waves from the outside could not reach this place. The originally violent spiritual vigor had also become gentle and tame. However, at the same time, the number of demons and spirits that gathered here was also much higher than other places, and most of them were floral spirits. Zhang Yan glanced at the map. From the markings on the map, it would take at most another 10 days or so to reach the cold Jade Ocean continent. However, after traveling for another quarter of an hour, he saw a crimson beam of light that was as red as blood qi rushing into the sky, illuminating everything within a radius of several thousand kilometers in red. Meanwhile, birds and beasts as far as the eye could see were rushing towards that direction. Zhang Yan took a closer look and saw that under the crimson light, there were strange trees that were shaped like peach trees. However, their roots protruded out of the ground and were shaped like claws, firmly clinging onto the stone mountain walls. On the branches, there were fruits that were as red as blood, and some of them looked like they were enshrouded in mist. Some of them looked like they were not yet ripe, and some of them were swaying. They were already ripe, and looked like they would fall with just a slight touch. He could feel that these fruits were unusual, and thinking about how Zhou Changju was looking for medicinal ingredients everywhere, he raised his hand and turned his mana on the array pivot, fixing the array map. He said to Jingyu, "Go and invite fellow Taoist Gong here." Gong Xuanzhao had been meditating in the side hall these days, and upon hearing the invitation, he immediately came over. After greeting him, Zhang Yan waved his sleeve and revealed the scene below. He asked, "Fellow Taoist Gong, what is this? Do you recognize it?" Gong Xuanzhao looked at the fruit trees, and his whole body shook. Blood-guiding fruit? Then his expression became excited and he said, "Shangjin, quickly order people to harvest these fruits before it's too late." Zhang Yan said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Gong, don't be impatient. These fruits are just now ripening, and they won't run away even if they are placed here. Why don't you tell me what they do first?" Gong Xuanzao changed his mind. With the strength of these people from beyond the heavens, even if demons from near and far came, they wouldn't be a match for them. These fruits were actually already in the bag. Thinking about this, he calmed down and said, "Shangjin, this blood-guiding fruit only ripens in the plentiful sky continent. Legend has it that it blooms once every 1,000 years, and it fades in a single day. If one consumes it, not only can it replenish one's qi and blood, it can also strengthen one's foundation, and it can also improve one's cultivation. If it was in the Eastern Barren Territory, it would be something that everyone would fight for. When I was young, I was fortunate enough to see one, and at that time, I took a bite. It was also because of this that I was able to strengthen my foundation. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 years have passed, and I didn't expect to see it again today, and there are actually so many of them." Zhang Yan smiled and asked again, "Is this fruit useful to demons?" Gong Xuanzao's expression turned serious, and he said, "It's useful, of course it's useful. If an ordinary bird or beast eats it, it can immediately transform into a demon. If a great demon eats it, it can also refine its qi and blood, and it might even obtain 1 or 2 supernatural powers. If Shangjin doesn't want to take it, then I would rather destroy it than leave it for the demons." Zhang Yan nodded slightly and said, "It's not easy for this fruit to grow. If the demons sent people to watch over it, it wouldn't be difficult. However, there isn't a single demon nearby, only some ordinary wild beasts. Is there anything special about it?" Gong Xuanzao said, "There's a reason for this. This fruit has another name in the 100 countries of Eastern Wasteland. It's called, the Lord does not see. If there's a spiritual being staring at it or staying close to it, it won't blossom and bear fruit. Only when the fruit grows can it be plucked, but that's only for a day. That's why it's even more precious." Zhang Yan pondered for a while. For cultivators, cultivation only required spiritual vigor, and there was no need to nourish their qi and blood. However, Gong Xuanzao was a disciple of the Duke of Eastern Wasteland, and even he had only seen one fruit very rarely. It was enough to show that this fruit was very precious. Zhang Yan didn't want to exchange it, and only sent it to the Danding courtyard. Who knows, it might be refined into some kind of medicinal pill. He then said to Jing Yu, "Later, pass down my order. If any Jinren from each sect is interested in this fruit, they can go and pluck it." He then turned to Gong Xuanzao and said, "Fellow Taoist Gong, why don't you come along too?" When Gong Xuanzao heard this, he was instantly excited. He put his hands together and bowed, saying, "Thank you very much, Great Shen." Then he hurriedly retreated. It seemed like he was afraid that if he was a few steps slower, all the fruits would be taken by others. After watching him leave, Jing Yu came up and asked, "Master, do you want me to inform the Shenfang country's messenger?" Zhang Yan smiled slightly. Jing Yu immediately knew what to do and said, "I'll go now." After a while, the clouds above the heaven-patching formation dispersed. One by one, cultivators from the 9 continents floated down from the sky and went straight to the blood-guiding fruit trees. Behind them, a few Dongtian Zenrens appeared. As soon as they reached the outside, they released their qi dynamic, and rays of clear spiritual light instantly pierced through the heaven and earth. The ordinary beasts below couldn't even rush into the rainbow-colored light formed by the fruit trees. Some of the demons who had awakened their spiritual intelligence were extremely frightened when they saw this scene, and they ran back at a speed faster than when they came. Only a few great demons who were confident in their magical power were unwilling to retreat just like that. They still lingered outside the formation, but they didn't dare to go any closer. After Gong Xuanzao came down from the formation, he sent out all the servants and soldiers who came with him. Once these fruits came into contact with the blood qi and spiritual vigor, they would be absorbed into the body, and couldn't be absorbed by magical power. Thus, he could only send people to pluck them one by one. At this moment, he glanced around and saw another group of people coming down. He recognized them as the people from Shunfang country, and he couldn't help but snort. However, he couldn't stop them at this moment, and could only urge the people below to move faster. With the cooperation of the cultivators of the 9 continents and the people of the 2 countries, in less than 2 hours, more than half of the blood-guiding fruit trees had been plucked. The remaining ones, which hadn't completely ripened, immediately stopped growing after being rushed by the people's qi dynamic. After the fruits were plucked, the branches and leaves of the fruit trees became withered and gray, as if they had lost all vitality in an instant. It would take thousands of years for them to return to their original state. Han Ziyang and Du Yunzhan, the 2 spiritual masters of the Qinsong school, were standing together at this moment. When the former saw this scene, he couldn't help but say, if someone from the Taihao school was here, they might be able to use these fruits to plant the tree again. Du Yunzhan said, the cultivation method of this school is also passed down from ancient times in the 9 continents. It should be useful in the mountain and sea realm. Perhaps we can find some people to cultivate it. The entire Taihao school had been destroyed in the calamity of humans, and not a single disciple had survived. However, the ancient scrolls and records were still there. Han Ziyang said, this is no small matter. It won't be too late to discuss it at the next meeting. Du Yunzhan thought about it for a moment, then nodded. As the cultivators of the 9 continents paused for a moment, Cha Qingyi's wisp of divine sense was already outside the frigid Jade Sea prefecture. On a verdant tree, a hanging green fruit suddenly swelled up like a balloon, then fell to the ground with a thud. Its outer shell cracked, and a long worm burrowed out. The worm rolled on the ground, then transformed into a human. Cha Qingyi crawled up from the ground and waved his hand, causing the countless rotten leaves on the ground to transform into a green robe. He had planted this clone more than 1,000 years ago, and it had accumulated enough life force to support his transformation. Along the way, his divine sense had used countless clones, but he had spent a great deal of effort over the past 1,000 years, personally planting each one of them. He looked up at a dark green mountain in the distance that pierced the sky. That was where the radiant extermination bird clan lived, Mount Whiteshroud. However, it was still more than 50,000 kilometers away from here. It wasn't that he didn't want to plant his clone closer, but that if he went any closer, he feared that the blood qi left behind by the green nightmare demon king would scatter it. Because of this, he couldn't fly high in the sky, and could only travel along the ground. However, he didn't have anything to prove his identity. If he went over now, he would definitely be killed by the demon birds patrolling the perimeter. Therefore, he needed to make some preparations. He opened his hand, and dozens of strange worms burrowed out of his palm and burrowed into the nearby tree. One day, figures that looked exactly like him appeared. With a slight command from him, one of them suddenly dashed out and charged into the blood qi barrier. Chapter 1252. Cha Qingyi was well aware of the rude and unreasonable behavior of the Mianyao tribe. Not to mention that he did not bring a token. Even if he did, if he made them unhappy, not only would he not be able to see the great sage, he might even lose his life because of this. It was not easy for this avatar of his to get here, and he was not willing to give it up just like that. Therefore, he could only use the avatar to open the way. He sat down cross-legged and thought, once the blood barrier under Mount Bai Bai is triggered, the patrolling tribe of the extermination Ming tribe will probably notice it. There should be results in at most 2 hours. Although the avatar was extremely fast, the area here was vast. Other than the shadow of the towering mountain in the distance, the surroundings were empty plains. After walking for a long time, he would feel a sense of powerlessness. It was as if no matter how fast he flew, he would not be able to get any closer. Suddenly, a 10-foot-long 6-winged demon bird flew in the sky. Its fierce eyes looked down, and when it saw the avatar, it bent down and rushed down. The avatar saw that the sky above suddenly darkened. He raised his head and said loudly, "I am Feng." Before he finished speaking, the giant bird had already swept past his body. In the blink of an eye, it had been torn into pieces and thrown onto the ground like a piece of trash. With a ruthless cry, it once again disappeared into the clouds. The moment the avatar was destroyed, Cha Qingyi had already noticed it. He was expressionless and urged another 2 avatars to rush in. This time, after traveling for more than 1,000 miles, he encountered the demon bird again. One of the avatars said, "I am Feng." He was torn to pieces by the sharp claws before he could finish his sentence. At this moment, another avatar continued, "Great Sage Qing Pai's daughter." After these words were said, the strange bird's eyes seemed to flash for a moment, but then it was overshadowed by a fierce glint, and the avatar was also torn to pieces. Cha Qingyi was not discouraged, and sent a few more avatars out. These avatars were manifested by borrowing a part of the vitality. Even if no one attacked, they would still die in a day or two. It was also because this big tree had accumulated enough vitality for 1,000 years, or he would not be able to make such a change. An hour later, the avatar collided with the demon bird again. This time, he said a few more words, but the other party still turned a deaf ear. Once again, he killed all of them. Cha Qingyi's expression did not change at all. She still sent out her doppelganger, but the result was the same as last time. After dozens of times, the demonic bird saw that he was persistent, as if there was no end to it. It finally stopped attacking and said coldly, "What do you want to say?" Cha Qingyi put his hands together and bowed, saying, "I'm here on the request of Lady Shu Yang. I have an important matter to discuss with Great Sage Qingwen." The demonic bird revealed a look of disdain. "A desolate fae like you wishes to meet His Majesty?" Cha Qingyi said, "My status is indeed lowly, but this matter is of utmost importance. It concerns the life and death of the Mieming clan. Now that Lady Shu Yang is imprisoned because of this matter, I have no choice but to report it to the great sage." Although the demonic bird was a little suspicious, when it heard that the great sage Green Melon's daughter had been captured, it took the matter more seriously. "Do you have a token?" Cha Qingyi said, "The token is still on the way, but I have guts as big as the sky. How would I dare to deceive your tribe?" He did have a token, the feather of Great Sage Yang. Before he was prepared to break out of the prison, a servant had already brought it out of the formation map. However, it was not as fast as his clone. The demonic bird stared at him for a while and said, "Wait here. Don't move around casually." Cha Qingyi was very respectful and said, "I dare not, I will wait here." The demonic bird spat a mouthful of colorful mist at him, then flapped its wings and let out a long cry. It flew into the clouds. Cha Qingyi looked at the colorful mist on his body. As he had dealt with the Mieming bird tribe before, he knew that this was a mark of the demonic bird, preventing him from being killed by other demonic birds. However, at the same time, if he dared to move casually, this mist would take his life. He waited for a full 3 days and nights. Only then did he see the demonic bird fly back. He was a little surprised. It was not that he thought it was too long, but rather that it was too fast. This place was tens of thousands of miles away from Mount Concealed White. Not to mention running back and forth, it would not be strange for it to take 10 days to half a month to report to the higher-ups. The demonic bird came above him and said, "You are lucky. I met a smart gentleman on the way, and he asked me to bring you to him. However, a gentleman does not like sneaky people. Where is your real body? Come with me." Cha Qingyi knew that the only one who could be called a gentleman in the Mieming tribe was the son of Great Sage Qing Mei. He became spirited and said, "I am still outside the boundary of blood qi." In reality, the one outside was not his real body. However, as long as he did not say anything, others would not be able to tell. The demonic bird stared at him and said irritatedly, "A gentleman cannot wait for long. Come quickly, I will bring you there." Cha Qingyi said, "I am coming." Fortunately, this place was only an hour away from the border of the blood border. The avatar from the outside quickly arrived. The demonic bird grabbed him and soared into the sky, flying east. About a day later, he saw a ball of green air rolling in the sky. Cha Qingyi exclaimed, could it be that this is the turbid clear sky?" The bird demon looked at him in surprise. "You also know of the turbid clear sky?" Cha Qingyi said, "When we fought against Great Sage Chu Lian, I served under Great Sage Qing Mei. I was fortunate to hear a few great sages from your tribe mention it. The famous turbid clear sky, of cold jade ocean continent was formed naturally. It was rumored that every piece of clear sky contained a small world. However, he had only heard of it. This was the first time he saw it. The bird demon seemed to get to know him again. He said, "I did not want to fight that great battle. You did not die. You have some ability." There were many wild demons that participated in that battle, but more than 90% of them died in battle. Those that survived were all skilled. Cha Chingy hurriedly said, "I dare not. I only know a little about the way of survival." The bird demon's gaze swept over him, then looked ahead. He said, "That piece of turbid clear sky is the hunting ground that His Majesty bestowed upon wise gentlemen." Cha Chingy's heart moved. He had heard of this wise gentleman before. He knew that he was favored by great sage Qing Ying and was very likely to be the next tribe leader. It seemed that his luck was good this time. He had met the right person. The bird demon flapped his wings and flew over. When he neared, he put him down on a stone altar. He said, "Wait here. I will go in and report." With that, he rushed into the clear sky. After an hour, he saw a large carriage fly out. In front of the carriage, there were over 100 white birds with clean feathers pulling the carriage. Behind them, there were tens of men wearing helmets and armor. On the carriage stood a white-haired young man. He had an incomparably handsome face. He held a golden rein in his hand and wore a white cloak with a red necklace fluttering in the wind. To his left and right, there were two tall youths with bows and spears on their backs. Cha Chingy knew that the wise gentleman had arrived. The descendants of Qing Fu would often travel in human form. However, this was not because they admired the human form, but because they wanted to reduce the consumption of blood qi. He saw that the flying carriage was heading straight for him. He hurriedly lowered his head and put on a respectful expression. Master Tsongji came closer and stopped the carriage. He looked up and asked, "Are you that person?" Cha Chingy hurriedly said, "Yes, I am. Greetings, Lord White Feather." The wise gentleman was a little surprised. He said, "I haven't used this title for hundreds of years. I remember it now, but not much." Cha Chingy said, "Not at all. Lord White Feather is famous. Even a lowly person like me often hears people talking about it." Although the wise gentleman knew that he said it on purpose, he couldn't help but feel proud. In the mountain and sea realm, be it mystic cultivators or demons, when cultivating, they didn't care about forbearance. Sometimes they would let themselves go. Instead, it was easier to stimulate blood qi. Judging from his expression, Cha Chingy knew that he was in a good mood, so he took the opportunity to speak. "This time, Lady Shu Yeong was captured. I was entrusted by her to inform the clan of this news." The wise gentleman said, "Yang was sent to the eastern wasteland many years ago. So, you also came from that place?" Cha Chingy said, "Yes." The wise gentleman said, "Although Shu Yeong is only a lowly girl, she won't be bullied by outsiders. Who is so daring as to capture the noble daughter of my Ming clan? Is it someone from the eastern wasteland?" Cha Chingy replied, "This matter is indeed related to the eastern wasteland countries, but the one who captured the noble daughter is someone else." The wise gentleman's gaze turned cold. He said, "Tell me who this person is." Cha Chingy said, "Does the wise gentleman still remember that when the sky opened a crack a month ago, a huge fish came to our realm? It was these people from the sky who captured the noble daughter." The wise gentleman frowned. "People from the sky?" 2 months ago, when the heaven and earth pass was smashed open, it alarmed the 4 regions. How could he not know? But to be able to cross the void to come here, it must not be a simple person. He was not the clan leader, and the number of people he could use was limited. It was not worth it to go against them for a lowly girl. Cha Chingy saw his hesitation. He took a step forward and said, "Bai Yulang, I came here this time not only to seek help for Lady Shu, but also for another important matter." "Another important matter?" The wise gentleman glanced at him and said, "Tell me about it." Cha Chingy said, "I've found out that those people from outer space are discussing with the other countries of the eastern wasteland. They want to find a way to attack your tribe. To prevent the news from leaking, they captured the Yeong noble girl." The cultivators of the 9 continents did not hide their attack on the cold Jade Ocean region. He pretended to be a messenger and stayed in the heaven-patching formation for a few days, so he naturally heard some rumors. But he did not know the details, so he added some of his own guesses and deductions. The wise gentleman did not believe him. He laughed and said, "How laughable! The eastern wasteland continent and the cold Jade Ocean ship are extremely far apart. There are countless demon clans on the way. How many great mystic cultivators could there be in the eastern wasteland countries? If not for Boda City, they would have died on the way before reaching here." Cha Qingyi said, "Lord Bai Yulong, you may not know this, but those people from the sky have a divine item that can carry millions of people in the sky. I think this is what they are relying on." The wise gentleman's expression froze. If the other party could come from the sky, then it would not be difficult for them to cross the 2 regions. He asked doubtfully, "Are you serious?" Cha Qingyi said, "I am but a barren land, how would I dare to lie to you?" The wise gentleman's expression kept changing. He did not care about the 100 nations of the eastern wasteland, but who knew what tricks those people from the sky had? After thinking for a long time, he pointed at Cha Qingyi and said, "Keep an eye on this person." The people on the left and right responded in unison. The wise gentleman pulled the reins, and the flying carriage turned and flew away. Looking at its direction, it was heading towards the highest point of Mount Concealed White. Chapter 1253. P.S. Something came up at home and I can't get away. I'll try to update one more chapter at night. If I really can't make it, I'll make it up tomorrow afternoon and update 2 more on Monday. In the sky above Mount Bai, there was a flock of vultures circling and letting out dull screeches. Because there were too many of them, they looked like a thick mass of dark clouds. Wise gentlemen had always loved cleanliness and disliked this thing. However, this was the arrangement of an elder in the tribe. As long as he didn't sit on the throne, he couldn't change this. He frowned and could only think of a way to go around it. After making a detour, he landed on the peak of the mountain. He got off the carriage and hurried to a cave in front of him. This cave was more than 300 meters wide and endlessly deep, like the mouth of a giant beast. On the outside, there were dozens of boiling lava bubbling, looking incomparably scarlet. In the middle of the pool, there were more than 10 tall pillars, all of which were piled up with unpolished boulders. The top was covered with gorgeous fur, and there were tens of thousands of beast bones inserted into the pillars. The sharpened ends were all pointed outwards. From top to bottom, there was a rough, barbaric, and violent aura. From time to time, a flying vulture would swoop down from the sky and crash into the stone pillar in a frenzy, allowing its body to be penetrated by the bone spear. After that, drops of blood would drip into the pool, and instantly, a bloody mist would rise and slowly seep into the pillar. At the top of the stone pillar, there was a silver-haired old man sitting. At this moment, when he heard the footsteps approaching, he suddenly stood up, his eyes gradually filled with a bloody red color. Wise gentleman knew that no matter what his identity was, if he approached this place and didn't take out the token in time, he could be killed by the person guarding the cave. He hurriedly took out a crimson blood plume and held it high above his head with both hands. As he walked, he said, "The 38th son, Shi Ling, is here. I urgently want to see the king." The silver-haired old man glanced at the red plume and the bloody light in his eyes dissipated. He didn't say anything and sat back down. Wise gentleman let out a long breath and quickened his pace, walking into the cave. Boom! When he arrived at the cave, a wave of fiendish aura rushed towards him. In front of him, a 1,000-feet-long green mantis suddenly appeared. It lowered its head and arched its horns. Its body leaned forward and its muscles bulged. Its eyes were red as if it was about to rush over. Wise gentleman's feet paused for a moment before he resumed his stride. That grasshopper didn't move at all, allowing him to pass. It turned out that it was just an inanimate object. But just now, they weren't going far. Another giant eagle appeared above. It spread its wings and spread its claws. Its eyes shone with a sharp light as if it was about to swoop down at any moment. This was the first time Sui Fei had seen it, But he still felt his heart skip a beat and his whole body trembled. He quickly stabilized his chi and blood and continued forward. The rest of the journey was filled with all sorts of oddities. A fiendish monster appeared beside the path of Tao. All of these were formidable fiendish devils that the extermination bird tribe had killed during their numerous expeditions against the outside world over the past tens of thousands of years. Their corpses had been made into mountain guarding totems by the successive tribe leaders, and they were placed here to guard the abode. If one's blood chi wasn't strong enough, or if one's will wasn't strong enough, it would be difficult for them to even take a step here. Hugh said he broke into the back room. At first, it was easy for the smart gentleman, but the further he went, the more difficult it became. These great demons all had powerful backgrounds. Some of them even came from ancient times. The power of their divine abilities had even reached the stage where they could merge with the heavens and earth. He used an entire day to walk out of the cave tunnel with heavy footsteps. At this moment, he was already sweating profusely, and his chi had been greatly depleted. Looking up, what appeared in front of him was a dark blue cloud of light. It was as big as a mountain, and there were colorful broken lightning inside. It was like a nebula in the sky, constantly rolling and rotating. This was the turbid clear sky, where the great sage Green Nightmare resided. This item had been in the hands of the Demon King for thousands of years, and it was difficult for those who weren't related to him to enter. The smart gentleman had the red feather in hand, so there was naturally no obstruction, and he easily passed through. As the scene before his eyes flashed, he was already standing in front of a cliff. There was nothing around him, and in the abyss beneath his feet, clouds of turbid fog floated. He knelt on the ground and said loudly, 38 words Yusong, I have something to ask of Royal Father. In the fog, a fierce eye suddenly opened. It was like the scorching sun in the sky, scorching golden red, causing everything around it to become scorching hot. With just a single glance, it was practically able to tear apart a large stretch of mist below. It was truly difficult to imagine just how enormous the body behind it was. Facing this eye, the smart gentleman felt a bone-deep fear. He knew that this was the suppression of his chi. He hurriedly pressed his forehead tightly to the ground and said with a trembling voice, Royal Father. A thunderous rumble came from midair, and it also revealed a coldness that made one's skin turn cold. What are you here for? The smart gentleman's body trembled, and he repeated Jing Pan Great Sage's words in full detail, not daring to change a single word. Then there was a moment of silence. The smart gentleman's heart was uneasy. Just as his body was about to stiffen, the voice finally sounded again. There is indeed a cloud of fog coming towards me. It will reach Cold Jade Ocean continent in at most 10 days. The smart gentleman was shocked. He didn't expect those people from beyond the heavens to come so quickly. Then he was delighted. His timely report was also meritorious. He knelt on the ground and didn't dare to raise his head. He said, Royal Father, please tell me what I should do. The owner of the voice seemed to think for a while, then said coldly, These years, the clansmen have been on expeditions everywhere. Although the territory has become wider and wider, there are not many clansmen left in Mount Hidden White. Go tell the elders in the clan to light up the chi and blood beacon fire, and order them to come back and defend the holy mountain. Do not delay. The smart gentleman's body trembled, and he said seriously, I understand. After he left, the fierce eyes suddenly let out a ball of light, and he shouted, Chu Lien, do you still want to struggle at this time? In the depths of the endless fog, there was an incomparably huge heart-shaped lotus. The flower bud was tightly closed, and there was not a single gap. Its roots were deeply rooted in the blue sky. At this moment, it was twisting, and two even larger claws were holding it tightly, not allowing it to escape. A voice sounded from the other lotus bud, Yu Qinging, I don't want to escape, but this time, the enemies are here. Don't even think about leaving. The great sage Qinging said coldly, Fool, do you really think those cultivators from beyond the heavens can do anything to my Mieming tribe? If it wasn't for the fact that I have to completely refine you, I would have gone out and killed them long ago. The lotus flower didn't speak anymore, but its struggle was even more intense than just now. At the same time, in Mount Hidden White, a ball of blood chi suddenly rose into the sky. The billowing smoke almost dyed half the blue sky. In just a few breaths of time, on top of a mountain far away that faced the sea, there was also a blood flame that rushed up. Not long after, on the other side of the sea, on the mountain peak that was vaguely visible, there was also a blood flame that illuminated the heavens. Millions of miles away, in Tantaijo, a handsome young man with a jade-like complexion was talking to an old man with a gentle smile on his face. At this moment, the sky suddenly rose up, and the smile in his eyes immediately disappeared. The old man's expression turned serious, and he said, "Young master, it's the blood chi beacon fire. His Majesty is summoning us back." The young man pondered for a moment, then said, "When the blood chi beacon fire rises, there must be a great enemy invading. I didn't think that after the battle with the great sage Chu Lien, after 1,000 years, someone would dare to invade our ancestral land again. I wonder who it is." The elder frowned. "In this northern heaven-chill abyss, there are very few who dare to go against our tribe now. The lotus heart butterfly is far away in the west, and the mountain sun ghost has long escaped into the abyss. I haven't heard any movements from these two tribes." The young man thought for a moment, then said, "Not necessarily. It must be someone from the northern heaven-chill abyss. Maybe they came from somewhere else. But there's no point in guessing now. We'll find out when we return to Mount Hidden White." He took another look at the blood chi beacon fire and said, "We don't have much time, at most 8 or 9 days. Immediately summon all the beast saints and follow me to the cloud whale. We'll return to Mount Hidden White. If we're late, Royal Father won't forgive me." Tens of thousands of miles away, a green mountain was being besieged by countless demons. On the ground, there were endless demon soldiers, and in the sky, there were demon birds circling around. And on the opposite mountain, a valiant woman stood on a large carriage made of bronze and gold. She was surrounded by a dozen beast saints of different appearances. At this moment, she was looking forward with a smug look. A beast saint said, "As long as we take down this place and eliminate the last branch of the great sage Chu Lien, the territory under your control will double and you'll surpass Feng Junzi." The woman casually waved her hand and said, "The territory doesn't matter. As long as we can take the ancestral spirit root of the plant spirits, we won't have to worry about them stirring up trouble again." The demonic saint said, "Mister, you are right. These plant spirits are the most annoying. As long as their ancestral veins and spiritual roots are not damaged, they will be able to recover their original appearance in the coming year. Mister, I believe that great sage Green Nightmare will be happy to hear about this." The woman smiled reservedly. At the same time, there was a hint of fire in the depths of her eyes. Quelling the chaos of the foreign races wasn't her goal. What she really wanted was the ancestral spirit root of the plant spirits. It could be used to refine blood chi. As long as she could completely refine it, she believed that she would become the strongest among the great sage Qingpai's children. However, at this moment, a beam of blood-red light suddenly shot into the sky. It was like a floating flame, dyeing the sky red. An old man who had never spoken before suddenly changed his expression and said in a deep voice, "Lady, it's the blood chi beacon fire. There's a change in the ancestral mountain. Please quickly reorganize the troops and return to Cold Jade Ocean continent." "What?" The woman looked at the sky and revealed a look of disbelief. She slapped Cheshire hard and said hatefully, "Why at this time?" The old man reminded, "Lady, His Majesty has summoned you. Don't delay." The woman suddenly turned around and stared at him. The old man didn't take a step back. He said in a deep voice, "Lady, everything is given by His Majesty. His Majesty only needs to say one word and everything will vanish." The woman's body trembled. After 100 years, she had finally gathered all the demons within 1,000,000 miles to attack Ling Ying Mountain. The price she had to pay for this was all the savings she had accumulated over thousands of years. Now that she had to give up the fruit that was so close to her, how could she be willing to do so? The old man reminded again, "Lady, don't make a mistake." The woman looked at the mountain in front of her unwillingly. She gritted her teeth and raised her hand. She said in a hoarse voice, Order all the troops to retreat and return to the ancestral mountain. Chapter 1254. The people of the Mieming bird tribe had been fighting all year round and were scattered all over the northern heaven-chill abyss. However, after seeing the blood and fire, they all put down what they were doing and led their men back to the ancestral land of Mount Concealed White. Great Sage Qing Pai had over 1,000 children, but there were only about 20 of them who had become ancient demons and received fiefs. However, only 5 of them had powerful forces. These people usually guarded their own areas and were far away from Mount Concealed White. Without special means, it would take at least a few years to gather all of them. However, in order to summon their tribesmen in times of emergency, all of them had a cloud whale. No matter how far away they were, any cloud whale could return to the king whale's side in an instant without expending much vitality. However, if they wanted to return, they could only rely on the whale's own strength. Outside Mount Bai Bai, a giant whale that was translucent and looked as if it was made of crystal jade appeared out of thin air and suddenly appeared outside the mountain. When it stopped, a wispy cloud of mist slowly gushed out from the top of its head and covered its entire body. After a while, the eldest young master walked out of the cloud chi with 12 ancient demon sages. He looked around and saw that the foot of the mountain was empty. If he was not mistaken, he should be the first person to arrive after seeing the fire. However, as the eldest son of Great Sage Qing Pai, it was reasonable for him to return first. It would be a mistake if he lagged behind. A flying carriage came from the mountain peak and landed in front of him. Gentleman Tsong came down from the carriage and bowed. "Greetings, eldest young master." The eldest young master thought quickly and asked, "You were the one who lit the fire?" Jun Zitsong was very humble and said, "I was only following the orders of my father." The eldest young master nodded and asked solemnly, "Who are the invaders this time?" Jun Zitsong said, "I received news that it was the cultivators from beyond the heavens who came here a month ago. They joined forces with the countries of East Baron to invade." "Cultivators?" Jun Zitsong said, "That's what they call themselves. Their abilities are completely different from mystic cultivators." The eldest young master immediately realized that his 38th brother knew many things that he did not. He savored the word cultivator for a moment, then said to her, "In a moment, come to my palace for a chat." Jun Zitsong bowed and said, "Yes." There were rumors that he was the next clan master. That was just a wild guess from someone who didn't know the situation. If one did not become an ancient fae, one would not be granted a fief. He had no subordinates. Even if he sat on it, he would be thrown off. The brothers and sisters above him were not to be trifled with. And the eldest young master happened to be the one with the greatest hope. He did not want to go against him. Not only that, if he had the chance, he would try to get close to him. At this moment, there was a ripple in the distant sky, and another cloud whale appeared. As the cloud chi surged out, a valiant woman walked out, and behind her were more than 10 ancient demons. In terms of aura, she was not much weaker than the eldest young master. However, her face was covered in frost, and it was obvious that she was in a bad mood. The elder beside the eldest young master came over. "Eldest young master, Lady Yin Lady has arrived. It seems like she has recruited many capable people over the past few hundred years." Eldest young master smiled. "Don't worry about her. No matter how much Father Wang dotes on her, he will not pass the position to a woman. The only one we need to be wary of is Yuchi." He swept his gaze. "I think he will be here soon." The elder nodded subconsciously. Yuchi was the 3rd son of the Green Nightmare Great Sage, and his forces were not small. It was said that he had recruited many ancient demon sages from the sea. Right now, he was the only one who could compete with the eldest young master. The rest were not worth mentioning. About 10 breaths later, a cloud whale appeared in midair. This time, among the people who had come, the leader was a middle-aged man with a thick beard. His steps were steady, and his expression was resolute. The ancient demon sages behind him were not only from the outer seas water race, but there were also several of his brothers. It was worth mentioning that these people all had fiefdoms. The middle-aged man seemed to sense that someone was observing him, so he turned his head to look. Eldest young master smiled warmly and took the initiative to greet him. Yuchi, now that we are facing a great enemy, let's put aside our quarrel for now. The middle-aged man fell silent. However, he could feel that there seemed to be a pair of fierce eyes staring at him from the White Veil Mountain. Even if he did nothing, it could still give him great pressure. He immediately understood what Father Wang needed him to do. Not daring to hesitate, he straightened his expression and clasped his hands together in a salute. Eldest young master is right. We, the Qieming tribe, cannot afford to be thrown into disarray in front of the enemy. Before we wipe out the enemies, I and my men will obey the orders. Good. Eldest young master was overjoyed. Before he returned, he knew that although this was a crisis, it was also an opportunity for him. Out of all the brothers and sisters, he was the most powerful. Under the condition that the great sage Qing Ying didn't show himself, he was the most suitable person to unite the tribe and combine them into a single force. If they could repel the invading enemy, then there would be no need to choose the next tribe leader. It would definitely fall on him. After receiving Yuchi's promise, he impatiently looked towards Ying Shu Envy. Although Ying Shu Envy's expression was somewhat unconvinced, she could feel the pressure coming from the depths of Mount Concealed White. She had no choice but to lower her head and say in a muffled voice, Shu Ying will also listen to Eldest Young Master's orders. Eldest Young Master smiled and bowed deeply to Mount Concealed White. I will definitely behead the enemies one by one and present them to Father Wang. Just as he finished speaking, a rumbling voice rang out above everyone's head. Remember what you said. Hearing this voice, everyone felt their hearts tremble. Their blood boiled and they could not help but want to prostrate themselves. Luckily, it was only a short sentence and they could still endure it. It was just that their bodies were a little shaky. Among everyone, only Eldest Young Master's expression remained the same. He waved at Yutsong and said, Yutsong, come with me. Tell me about those cultivators from beyond the heavens. Finishing, he did not wait for a response and led the group of people towards the palace in the mountain. Yutsong's usual arrogance seemed to have disappeared as she obediently followed. The middle-aged man looked at the two's backs with some fear in his eyes. He thought for a moment and transmitted his voice to Ying Shu Envy. Yuxian's blood and qi are full. He is already above us. Ying Shu Envy snorted and said, Perhaps Father Wang is deliberately looking out for him. The middle-aged man said in a low voice, Even so, we can only listen to his orders. You and I need to be careful not to be betrayed by him. Ying Shu Envy said in a muffled voice, I know, I don't need you to remind me. Meanwhile, on the other side, Zhang Yan was standing in the main hall, looking at the scenery in front of him. As the heaven-patching formation gradually approached Mount Concealed White, he had already taken in the surroundings of Ice Jade Ocean Continent. The entire ocean province was surrounded by 3 mountain ranges in the north, south, and west. Only the east side faced the sea, and there were countless islands scattered like stars in the sky. It was somewhat similar to the terrain of the Great Pool of Dragon Lake. However, the inner region of this place was as vast as the 9 continents. This was also one of the reasons why he had chosen this place back then. In the center of the ocean province was an empty land. Mount Concealed White, the ancestral mountain of the Mieming bird, was standing on this land. In the eyes of ordinary people, this was just an ordinary continent. However, in the perception of his divine will that could see through heaven and earth, he discovered that this was actually a giant whale. The white land on its back was just a layer of jade mud wrapped around its wide back. However, the whale's situation did not look good. Its body was bound by flashing lightning chains, and it could neither speak nor move. He thought to himself, this should be the king of cloud whales that fellow Taoist Gong mentioned. The divine will extended further until it reached Mount Concealed White, but it was blocked by a layer of thick and violent blood qi. Looking at the qi activity here, it had been settled for at least 10,000 years. It must have been left behind by the Wanming demonic race. Even after so many years, its power did not decrease in the slightest. Zhang Yan smiled faintly, but did not force his way in. He could more or less estimate the strength of the opponent that was wrapped in such a layer of blood qi. Slightly calculating the distance in front of him, he would arrive in a few days. He said faintly, "Go and pass down the order. The war is imminent. Tell the spiritual masters to wait for the order." Jingyu bowed and went down to pass down the order. In the blink of an eye, another 3 days passed. In mount concealed white, the eldest young master walked out of the palace and looked up at the sky. Since the blood qi fire was ignited, almost all the Mieming bird tribes had rushed back. At this moment, there were millions of rainbow-winged giant birds circling in the sky. Looking around on every mountain top, there was a vast blood qi rolling in the sky. Counting carefully, there were a total of 86 of them. This meant that, including himself, there were 87 ancient demon sages here. In fact, if there was a little more time, more ancient demons could be gathered, but there were only 7 or 8 days. Therefore, the children of great sage Qing Ying could only bring as many people as possible. However, this force alone was unusually large. In the northern heaven chill abyss, there was no one that could compare. The eldest young master was overwhelmed with emotions. 9,000 years ago, the Mieming bird tribe was far from being as powerful as it was now. Even if they tried their best, they could only mobilize 30 ancient demons. They still needed to join forces with the Lotus Heart Butterfly and the Mountain Sun Ghost tribe to have the confidence to compete with the Eastern Wasteland Divine Kingdom. But today, the Lotus Heart Butterfly and the Mountain Sun Ghost tribes suffered heavy losses in that battle. They had not recovered for thousands of years. The Eastern Wasteland Divine Kingdom was divided into hundreds of countries. Since then, there was no high priest, and their strength was less than 1/10 of their original strength. Looking at the densely packed tribes that seemed to stretch to the end of the sky, the blood qi in his chest rose. So what if they were cultivators from beyond the heavens? So what if they were the 100 countries of the Eastern Wasteland? Under such a powerful force, they would definitely be crushed into powder. At this moment, there was a sudden loud noise in the distance. Everyone could not help but look over. They saw that outside the cold Jade Sea province, the blood qi barrier had been smashed to pieces, and in the distant sky, there seemed to be a huge cloud rolling over. All the people of the Mieming bird tribe were shocked. They knew that the cultivators from beyond the heavens had arrived. Chapter 1255. After smashing through several blood qi barriers, the sky-mending formation stopped tens of thousands of kilometers away. The clouds that shrouded the formation slowly dispersed, revealing the true appearance of the mystic sky continent. The demons below were all shocked to see this. What kind of divine power was it to be able to lift an entire continent into the air? The eldest young master's eyes narrowed. He had heard of this item before, but he was still shocked when he saw it with his own eyes. He took a slight breath and a calm expression appeared on his face. Then he led his entourage and a dozen or so of his clansmen to the high platform on the mountain peak. He breathed in the whistling wind and looked at the Mieming clansmen who were flapping their wings in the air. He made up his mind. With such a powerful force in hand, what was there to be afraid of? He raised his head and let out a shrill howl towards the sky. Tens of thousands of Mieming birds flew out from the flock of Mieming birds in the sky. They screeched and flew toward the formation. All the demons stared at it intently. The tens of thousands of bird demons were not slow and soon approached the sky-mending formation. However, there was a sudden fluctuation outside the formation. At this moment, there seemed to be tens of thousands of water and fire auras bursting out at the same time. This light was extremely dazzling and bright. All the demons couldn't help but close their eyes, and when they opened them again, they noticed that the tens of thousands of demonic birds had completely vanished without a trace, as if they'd never existed in the first place. Many of the demons cried out in alarm. What's going on? What kind of divine power is this? How could this be? Could it be an illusion? The eldest young master's expression changed slightly. He was the Mieming bird demon. According to ancient legends, he could determine the brightness of the sun and moon with a blink of his eyes, and reverse day and night. Just now, the light was not enough for him to avoid it, so he could see very clearly that in that instant, the tens of thousands of bird demons had been destroyed by countless lightning bolts. He deduced from his own experience. He suspected that such a method would consume a lot of energy and would not be able to succeed every time. However, he did not want to try it again. No matter how many of his clansmen there were, they could not afford such losses. He looked at the Jing Pan great sage standing beside him and said, "If that's the case, there is a powerful method outside that can stop people from entering." The great sage Jing Pan bowed and said, "Eldest young master, there's no need to worry. He won't just stand here and do nothing. He will definitely come out and fight me later." A clansman next to him said, "Eldest young master, I think that these extraterrestrial cultivators should be relying on this thing to dare to go against our Myeming tribe. Apart from this, I don't think they have much ability. When they come out, we can go up and deal with them." The people around him agreed, but some of them didn't really think so. However, belittling their opponents and boosting their own morale was also a common tactic. The eldest young master shook his head. Although he knew it was best to wait for them to show up, he couldn't do that. If these extraterrestrial cultivators didn't come down, he could wait for them for a day. But if they didn't come down, he couldn't wait for them for a year. One had to know that this was a battle in front of the ancestral mountain of the Myeming tribe. There was no way for them to retreat. Wouldn't he be seen as incompetent? Thus, he could not remain idle for too long. After thinking for a while, he said, "I remember that Shu Ying has 10,000 metal-eating bugs?" Someone next to him replied, "Yes, when Shu Ying was attacking Mount Ling Ying. Because those grasswood spirits were hard to deal with, she specially recruited a demonic saint from the tribe." The eldest young master immediately said, "Pass down my order. Ask Shu Ying to send this insect army into battle. There's no need to die, just attack from afar with poison." Someone immediately went to pass down the order. The eldest young master sneered. He didn't expect this insect army to break through the enemy's formation. As long as they acted like they were actively attacking, it would be enough. This way, even if these extraterrestrial cultivators didn't come out, no one would say anything. If they attacked these insect soldiers, it would be exactly what he wanted. He could also use this opportunity to weaken Shu Ying's subordinates. Shu Ying quickly received the order. She was startled at first, then she became furious. She said, "Do you think I'm easy to bully? So many of our tribesmen were killed when they went up. What can these insect soldiers do?" The person who came to pass the order shouted, "Young lady, are you going to disobey the order?" "You?" Shu Ying's gaze became extremely dangerous. Wings faintly spread out behind her. She was already in a bad mood, but now she wanted to throw caution to the wind. At this moment, the elder behind her reminded, "Don't be reckless. If you attack now, it will only give the eldest young master an excuse to take down Shu Ying." Shu Ying was shocked and had to calm down. She took a deep breath and said to a demonic saint under her, "Great sage Chong Ding, bring your tribesmen up." Although the demonic saint knew that this was dangerous, he was powerless to resist. Otherwise, he would be the first to die. It was worth it to bite the bullet and agree. As soon as he called out, a black tornado with billowing demonic aura rose from the top of the mountain and rushed into the sky. When it reached the top of the heaven-patching formation, the tornado dispersed. Insects with black shells and silver bellies came out and floated in the air. Great Sage Chong Ding also revealed his original form. He turned into a strange insect that was hundreds of feet long. The two jaws on the top of his head were like horns, and his antennae were as long as his body. He waved them around, and there were 6 pairs of sharp legs under his abdomen. His body was covered in layers of carapace, which was unusually heavy like black iron. Although it was proud of its bravery, the demonic birds were a lesson to it, so it did not dare to get too close. It only led its clansmen outside and spat out balls of black poisonous mist from afar, trying to corrode the layer of formation chi outside the formation diagram. Not long after, the sky was filled with thick fog and almost covered the sky. For a moment, it was quite a big scene. Just this square formation alone could be blocked by the joint attack of several grotto heavens, let alone the attack in front of them. At this moment, Inside the formation, Zhang Yan stood on the platform with his hands behind his back. Behind him were more than 20 grotto heavens from various sects, as well as the 3 great mystic cultivators from East Wilderness and Shenfanghua. He did not look at the demonic insects outside at all. He only looked at the surrounding landscape. Finally, his gaze shifted to the White Mountain, and he said calmly, "After this battle, this mountain will no longer exist in my eyes." He raised his hand, and a wave surged beside him. The huge body of the divine beast Black Tortoise appeared out of thin air. It then raised its head and roared, and the boundless seawater outside suddenly surged. Zhang Yan did not look back but said, "Mengzhen, you can do it now." Mengzhen bowed. From Qinsong School below him, Qinyu, Qiyuntian, Lu Junyang, Du Yunzhan, and other grotto heavens who were proficient in water techniques started to cast their spells. The spiritual energy in the surroundings was stirred by an invisible force. In this world, a shocking scene suddenly appeared. Outside the entire cold Jade Ocean continent, billions of hectares of seawater actually rose up and gradually turned into a circular wall of water. In the end, it closed in one place and covered the sky above. Under the leadership of the divine beast Black Tortoise and the joint efforts of many spiritual masters, it actually created a scene like the water of the 4 seas hanging upside down above the 9 continents. Once this technique was used, the cultivators of the 9 continents could advance and retreat freely, and none of the demons could escape. Even if things really couldn't be done, the water could still pour down and completely destroy the ocean region. When the demons below saw that the world around them was surrounded by seawater, they all felt that something was wrong. Many of the bird demons at the periphery were accidentally swept into the wall of water, and were instantly twisted into a pile of rotten meat by the turbulent water. Seeing this scene, it immediately caused panic among the demons. The eldest young master shouted, "It's just a small technique, what are you panicking about?" He glanced around and saw that the blood chi that soared into the sky was still stable, just like just now. He couldn't help but nod. As long as these ancient demon sages didn't panic, it would be fine. He said to the people beside him, "Yuchi has many water demon sages under him. Quickly order him to bring people over and use their magical powers to break this water wall." After Yuchi received the order, he didn't refuse. He called a few water demon sages over and said, "How many of you can break this magical power?" A demon sage with ears that reached his shoulders revealed a troubled expression and said with shame, "The chi dynamic in the water is inexplicably deep and unpredictable. The magical power of the person who cast the technique is far above us. I'm afraid it's not something we can break." Yuchi, however, wasn't angry. He thought for a moment and said in a low voice, "It's fine. Everyone, don't worry and do it. If it really doesn't work, we can just make some illusions. If the eldest young master finds something wrong, Yuchi will help you." The few water demon sages looked at each other, bowed together, and rushed to the water wall one after another. Zhang Yan didn't care about the demons below and just acted according to the previous plan. He said, "Spiritual Master Yuan, Spiritual Master Wen, Spiritual Master Shui, you guys can make your move now." The 3 people who were summoned all bowed to him. Yuan Hongyang took a few steps forward, grabbed his sleeve with one hand, and stretched out the other. He opened his palm, and a wisp of muddy yellow mist emerged, swirling in the air, and then gradually turned into a torrential turbid river, rushing around in the sky. He used a little mana, and a whirlpool appeared in the river, and then a ferocious demon head emerged from it. When Qingxiang moved to the side, and then he flicked his sleeve and activated the Blood God waterfall. After it arrived in the sky, rumbling resounded as it poured down, and it instantly left behind a 3 kilometers long bloody waterfall while the smell of blood suffused the surroundings. He used his technique again, and the blood water churned. After a moment, thousands of blood souls flew out with bloody light. Shui Dingyuan retreated slightly, and he summoned the Origin Clam sect's ultimate magic treasure, the Great Spiritual Tablet, and pointed his finger on the tablet. The tablet shook, and a dense spiritual light shot out from it, enveloping the blood souls of the demons. The number of them increased by a few times in an instant. These extra blood souls were only illusions, but with the power of the great spiritual tablet, it was impossible to recognize them no matter how they were investigated. Even if they were scattered, they would evolve again. At this moment, outside, Demon Saint Chongding led his clansmen to attack repeatedly, but when he saw that no one came out from the formation diagram, he unconsciously became much bolder, and he wasn't as cautious as before. Just when he was in high spirits, he suddenly heard an unusual sound by his ears, and then he saw the formation chi below him surge. Countless devils with hideous expressions carried sharp howls as they surged out from the formation diagram like a collapsing dam, and with a bang, they drowned him and the numerous insect soldiers. Chapter 1256. The Blood Soul Demon head surrounded Great Sage Chongding and started tearing and biting at him. However, this demon was known as Chongding because its hard shell was flawless and perfectly polished. No matter what external force came at it, it would be able to resist for a while. Moreover, its internal organs could even melt gold and iron, and it was abnormally tough. However, the Blood Soul Demon was coming at it ferociously. It was impossible to tell if there were millions or tens of millions of them, which really shocked it. Even if it was safe for now, how long could it last under such a siege? Therefore, it tried to open up a path with its blood chi. However, the spells of the Nether Spring sect and the Blood Soul sect were not only superficial methods, but they were also extremely filthy and corrosive. The moment the blood aura was released, it was immediately contaminated by the filthy aura. Then, it felt a cold and gloomy aura spread over its body. In the mountain and sea realm, the ancient demon great sages, with the exception of the plant spirits and metal and stone monsters, mostly focused on using their physical bodies to defeat their enemies. Although their spirits were strong, they were too big to defend against, and had no way of protecting themselves. After a while, it felt dizzy, as if it was about to fall asleep. This was because its spirit had been invaded, and no matter how strong its physical body was, it was useless. Now that it had lost its ability to defend itself, the surrounding demons all rushed forward. In just a few breaths, all of Great Sage Chongding's blood essence was sucked clean by the Blood Soul Demon, and his tough shell was devoured by the demon. After transforming into an ancient demon, these two types of demonic beasts received a boost. Their ferocious aura became even stronger than before. They stopped in the sky and swooped down in the direction of Mount Concealed White. They looked like a swarm of locusts. The eldest young master couldn't see what was happening above, but he could feel Great Sage Chongding's vigorous blood chi vanish in an instant, and his heart was shaken. Seeing that those demon-like creatures could kill this ancient demon Great Sage so easily, how could he dare to let them get close? He immediately pointed upwards and said to a demon saint beside him, "Arrogance, Great Sage, can you stop them?" Arrogance Transformation glanced at him nonchalantly and said confidently, "Eldest young master, just wait here." It leaped forward and instantly leaped out of the mountain top. It landed on the ground with a rumble, shrugged its body, and with a roar, it transformed into a thick hind limb. It was a single-horned monster with stripes all over its body that looked like a toad or a tiger. Although his body was not considered outstanding among the many ancient demons, he was still dozens of meters tall. When he touched the ground, his head was tilted back. He opened his mouth to the sky. His mouth was extremely large, and when he opened it, the upper half of his lips almost touched the back of his head. Seeing his actions, most of the demon saints present tensed up, especially those who had suffered before, and subconsciously moved a few steps away. The Great Sage of Deceit suddenly let out a muffled roar. He spat out a mouthful of yellow smoke, and the tens of thousands of demon heads and blood souls instantly dissipated. The eldest young master smiled. This Arrogance Transformation Great Sage was his most capable subordinate. No one knew where he came from. With a single roar, it could sever rivers and penetrate mountains. As for the yellow smoke, it could even disintegrate all living things. Up until now, he had never seen anyone who dared to stand in front of him after he had spoken. Yuan Hongyang and Wen Qingxiang were both slightly surprised. Originally, no matter what kind of attack the blood spirit demon received, as long as they didn't know the way to break it, the blood spirit demon wouldn't be able to withstand it. After it was scattered, it could be gathered again. But this time, it had truly disappeared. However, the purpose of releasing these monsters was unknown. He did not want to use this to destroy the Bright Bird tribe in one fell swoop. He wanted to use this to deplete the opponent's chi, blood, and magical power. Also, it was convenient for him to spy on the opponent's divine ability. Even if all the demons on the scene were destroyed, as long as their magic power was not exhausted, they could still be born from the river Styx and the blood waterfall. Yuan Hongyang saw that the absurd ancient demon seemed to have some tricks up his sleeve. Immediately, he had the intention to subdue it. He pondered for a moment and said, "Sect leader Shui, Sage Wen, let's make a deal. How about letting me have this demon?" Enlightened Master Wen looked at Shui Dingyuan and saw the latter nodding his head. He then said with a smile, "There are many ancient demons here. If Enlightened Master Yuan likes this one, feel free to take it." Yuan Hongyang gestured to the two of them, and with a wave of his will, the demon generals on the battlefield immediately scattered and no longer gathered in one place. The yellow smoke rushed up from below and only wrapped around a dozen demon generals, many of which were illusionary images. Compared to the results of the previous battle, the difference was too great. Seeing this, absurd great sage was enraged. The blood and chi on his body surged, and his body instantly swelled up. The yellow smoke that he spat out was also a few times bigger than just now. Although he killed many more demons, he could only barely stop them. More blood and souls of demons scattered in all directions. The ancient demon great sages on the various peaks also collided with these demons. Above the entire cold jade ocean continent, the divine ability, spiritual light, blood, chi, and yang fire burst out one after another. Rumbling sounds resounded throughout the world. The people of the 9 continents' grotto heaven looked down coldly, observing the changes of the divine ability of the ancient demon great sages. They did not underestimate the enemy just because they had the upper hand. Just now, the means of absurd great sage was enough to show that these demons had their own strengths. Moreover, their goal was to destroy the bird demon. As long as this race was not destroyed, it would not be considered a success. However, up until now, only demons from outside the race had come out. Not a single demon saint of the tribe had come out. The great sage of arrogance transformation charged at the very front. He looked majestic and insufferably arrogant. However, because he was constantly using his divine abilities after fighting for a while, his vitality was no longer as vigorous as before. It had already gradually weakened. All of a sudden, hundreds of demons appeared out of nowhere and rushed towards him from the side. It snorted and spat out a yellow smoke, but this time, it wrapped itself in it. The demons immediately stopped and just wandered around him. After a while, the yellow smoke dissipated a little, and the demons were about to pounce again. He hurriedly spat out another yellow smoke to cover himself, but this way, he could only take care of himself and could not see what was behind him. More demons passed over him and rushed towards where the eldest young master was. He immediately panicked and spat out another ball of yellow smoke into the air, blocking it. However, this way, there was a gap in the smoke that surrounded him. Dozens of demons immediately seized this gap and rushed in, biting his body, and desperately sucking his vitality and chi. Although absurd great sage's divine ability was strong, his physical body was slightly weaker than the other demon saints. Immediately, he let out a miserable cry and jumped, smashing a mountain rock into pieces. Then he rolled on the ground and desperately spat out yellow smoke to protect himself. He could no longer care about other things. Yuan Hongyang watched calmly. Although this monster's supernatural power was strong, it only had one kind of power from beginning to end. In his eyes, it was too weak, and he could easily find its flaws. He only needed to change his tactics slightly, and it was already exhausted from running for its life. The eldest young master was calm when he saw the blood spirits of the demons whizzing towards him. With a wave of his hand, the demon saints around him leaped into the sky and blocked the demons. However, as they used their divine abilities one by one, their weaknesses were soon exposed. After fighting for a while, they were already in a difficult situation. The eldest young master's heart sank at this scene. He had not seen such a troublesome enemy for a long time since the battle between the Mieming tribe and the great sage Crooked Lotus. He could not help but want to personally take action, but he quickly restrained himself. He thought to himself, these cultivators from beyond the heavens have strange divine abilities, but they probably haven't used their full strength yet. It would be inappropriate for me to expose my methods in advance, and I would lose my deterrent force. I can only act when they use their true killing moves. Before that, I can only rely on the people outside the tribe to stop them. He looked around again and saw that the other peaks were in a precarious situation, just like him. He knew he had to do something, so he immediately called a young man over and whispered a few words to him before handing over an item. The young man nodded and revealed his original body. He flew towards the peak of the mountain and soon landed in front of the great sage Qin Ying's cave dwelling. He raised the item in his hand and said, "On the orders of the eldest young master, Elder Shur, please open the bone rune pillar of my tribe." On the pillar in front of the cave, the old man sitting there opened his eyes and looked at the token a few times. He slowly stood up and grabbed at his chest, tearing it open. A large amount of blood spurted out. In just a moment, the 10 or so bone pillars were dyed red. At the same time, a long river of blood flowed down from the top of Mount Bibai. It didn't take long for it to spread to the top of all the peaks. Then, it condensed into countless strange runes that released dazzling rays of red light into the sky. The dozens of demonic beast saints who were fighting were illuminated by this light. They immediately felt their chi and blood surge, as if there was an endless amount of essence and blood energy pouring into them. They couldn't help but roar. The power of their divine abilities increased by several times in an instant. In just a short while, more than half of the heavenly demon's blood soul was swept away. Gongzi Zhao had been watching the battle from the side. He was deeply shocked by the power displayed by the cultivators of the 9 continents. But when he saw the scarlet rune, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Blood Chi rune. How is this possible? When Gongzi saw this, his face turned pale. He said with a trembling voice, "Jiue, Isn't this the blood chi rune that our eastern wasteland country used to fight against the 3 clans? How can this person use it?" He couldn't help but panic. The technique of blood chi rune was a great weapon used by the 100 countries of the eastern wasteland to deal with the demons. If this person also learned it, the consequences would be unimaginable. Gongzi Zhao looked at it for a while with a solemn expression and said, "Indeed, our divine country blood chi rune was at a loss. I didn't expect this demon to learn it." But he only learned 40 to 50% of it. It can only strengthen chi and blood and gather strength to fight against the enemy. It can't break the 6 absolute space. This person should have stolen it from the divine capital gate. He hasn't understood all the changes in it. He looked up at the hall. He was glad but also afraid. He thought to himself, if the Mieming tribe had mastered these blood chi rune, the people of the eastern wasteland country would have been reduced to their blood food the next day. Fortunately, these cultivators of the 9 continents came to conquer the cold Jade Sea province. Their methods were leaked in advance. Even if they failed, they were not unprepared. Zhang Yan looked around on the platform. He saw that under the illumination of the blood light, everyone's strength had greatly increased. But the demon's blood soul could no longer give them enough pressure. So he said, "Ing Zhenren, we can act according to the previous plan." Ing Chunqiu laughed. But a moment later, a brilliant sword light flew out from the heaven patching rune. It turned into hundreds of millions of sword lights and fell down. To be continued. Chapter 1257. Flying swords had never appeared in the mountain and sea realm, and the demons and devils on Mount Concealed White naturally didn't recognize them. However, when they saw the sword light shooting toward them, they instinctively sensed that something incredibly dangerous was approaching, and immediately unleashed blood chi shields or divine abilities to defend themselves. Many of the lesser demons with no divine abilities were unable to resist. Under the sword light, they were either cut into several pieces in the air or nailed to the ground. Only the annihilating birds circling in the sky saw that the situation was critical. They cried in unison, and with the help of the chi and blood pattern on the mountain, they connected the chi and blood of millions of their kind. In an instant, the blood light rose up and blocked most of the sword light. Although some still penetrated in, the casualties were reduced to a minimum. In the past, the 3 high priests of the Eastern Wasteland Divine Kingdom had relied on this pattern to combine the chi and blood of hundreds of thousands of Xian cultivators into one. They mobilized the huge spiritual vigor that was enough to stir up the world, and defeated the 3 families again and again. In the end, they had to retreat. However, the annihilating bird tribe had learned their lesson, so they copied the chi and blood pattern and used it for their own use. The sword light that slashed down from the sky lasted for more than half a minute, and then gradually became sparse. On the peaks of Mount Hidden White, there was a mournful scene. Except for the annihilating bird tribe, most of the demons under the ancient demon level were killed in battle. The mountain was covered with broken bones, flesh, and broken scales, mixed with dirty blood, and the smell of blood rose to the sky. Even the ancient monsters and great saints were battered and exhausted by the sword light. In just one round of attacks, 7 of them were killed on the spot, and the rest were all injured. Fortunately, they were all people with thick skin and flesh. As long as they didn't lose their lives in an instant, it wasn't difficult for them to recover from their injuries in a short time by relying on the power of their blood chi. But the key point was that there were not only sword light, but also countless blood demons. At this moment, they immediately seized the opportunity to bite and bite. Suddenly, several ancient demons were injured and died on the spot. The expression of the eldest young master changed. He had already realized that he could not let the situation go on like this. If they continued to launch attacks like just now, those extraterrestrial cultivators wouldn't even need to show up, and they would be able to kill everyone on their side. He had to think of a way to break out of this situation. He shouted loudly, "Yuchi, lead the demonic sages and destroy the Heaven Shang Continent 6 for me." Yuchi's heart sank. This was clearly trying to exhaust his forces. However, he had the great sage Qing behind him. He was also powerless to resist and could only let out a furious roar, "All demonic saints, follow me." He leaped into the sky and instantly transformed into a demon bird with golden-green feathers and a colorful tail. He spread his 8 pairs of wings and rose into the sky. The demon saints under his command also roared and revealed their original forms, leaping into the sky after him. "It's Gentleman Chi." The remaining dozens of ancient demons in Mount Concealed White saw that the exterminating bird clan had sent out their demon saint to participate in the battle. Their morale was immediately boosted, and they also rushed towards the heaven-mending pavilion. The eldest young master looked up and thought to himself, "If so many people go up, I don't believe that we can't force those extraterrestrial cultivators to come out and fight." The reason why he did not order the demons to do this earlier was because in a battle between 2 sides, under the premise that they could not figure out the opponent's strength, no one would not test the waters and immediately send out all their forces. Moreover, this kind of order could be given by anyone. However, it did not show his importance. Unfortunately, the situation changed too quickly. The ability of this group of extraterrestrial cultivators was far beyond his imagination. The battle had not even lasted for an hour, and not even a shadow of a person could be seen. As a result, they had no choice but to use this unwise plan and put most of their strength into the fight. Zhang Yan looked at the charging demons and smiled faintly, "We should have done this long ago." No matter how stable the heaven-mending formation was, under the combined attacks of dozens of ancient demons, it could not hold out for long, unless he personally went down and took charge of the formation. However, passively defending was never the best strategy. Moreover, there was still great sage Qing who had yet to show up in the formation. He needed to watch over this demon and did not need to care about the other demons. Mengzhen took a step forward and asked in a questioning tone, "Hall Master." Zhang Yan turned around and nodded, "Perfected ones, please use your own means." All the people of the grotto heaven in the hall nodded and flew out of the heaven-mending formation on a clear light. They scattered in the misty sky. Everyone was wrapped in misty chi clouds and had all kinds of magic treasures to protect themselves. Looking at the sky, a rainbow of spiritual light illuminated the sky. All of them were elegant and graceful, and their expressions were outstanding like immortals. Gongxian Zhao, Gong Ziyu, and Imo Du followed the crowd out of the formation. They released the blood qi in their bodies and showed their mystic comprehending bodies. Eldest young master saw that he had forced the people in the formation to come out, and his expression became slightly more excited. He took a few more glances and saw that the cultivators from beyond the heavens and the mystic cultivators added up were only around 30. The number was much less than he had imagined, and he could not help but feel more confident. He instructed his men, "The battle will be intense later, all of you have to be careful." His subordinates all nodded in agreement. Perhaps they did not take the incoming enemies seriously before, but now they had completely given up on such thoughts. Just from the unpredictable means just now, it could be seen that these cultivators from beyond the heavens were not easy to deal with. After Yuchi flapped his wings and flew into the sky, although he was at the forefront, he did not want to go up and die. He secretly activated his blood qi and performed a leap transformation. As he flapped his wings, there was an illusory mist. Brilliant clouds appeared, and there were even tiny sparks of lightning flashing on his body. His figure was illusory, and he looked like he was on the left and on the right. If an ordinary demon accumulated enough blood qi and became an ancient demon, they would naturally obtain a divine art. However, the Mingming bird had the bloodline of a demon ancestor and was different from most of the wild demons. After leaping into the ancient demon realm, it could master at least 2 kinds of divine arts. A small number of those with rich blood qi might even have a few. In addition to the endless potential that it possessed, it was completely incomparable to other demons. In the 9 continents cultivator formation, Sun Huang saw the demon bird with gorgeous feathers rushing over. She went forward and gestured to Mengjida and Ing Chuanxiu, saying, "Spiritual masters, can you hand this demon over to me?" Mengjida and Ing Chuanxiu exchanged a few telepathic messages and then nodded in agreement. Sun Huang bowed again, and with a shake of her sleeve, she summoned a sword beam and slashed it forward. Yuchi didn't seem to be able to dodge in time, and he was struck by the sword beam. However, his figure shattered like a bubble, clearly not his true body. However, the sword beam didn't stop there. It suddenly jumped, and in that instant, it leaped out and slashed at the seemingly empty void. Suddenly, there was a miserable cry, and the demon bird's figure appeared. However, a few of its wings on the left had been cut off, and half of its body was drenched in blood. It shook its body, and in the blink of an eye, it disappeared into thin air. Sun Huang's sharp eyes swept around, and she immediately found its whereabouts. The sword beam lengthened, and she went straight for a certain place thousands of miles away. The eldest young master saw everything clearly from below, and he cursed inwardly. He knew that Yuchi's methods weren't limited to just this, and the injuries he suffered just now weren't serious. With a surge of blood qi, he could recover. Now that he retreated, it was clear that he didn't want to fight. At this time, most of the ancient demons in the sky were full of fighting spirit, and with the exception of a few, their fighting spirit soared. They roared along the way and sped up towards the opponents they had found. After Sun Jian emerged from the spell formation, he didn't stand still like the other enlightened masters. Instead, he shot forward in a beam of light, looking at the demons charging toward him with a cold smile. Then he circulated his magic power, which transformed into an enormous sea of energy that covered everything in the sky. Within it floated heavy water, and lightning crackled. Because the mountain and sea realm was flourishing with spiritual energy, the restraints of heaven and earth were even weaker. As soon as he released his Dharma idol, it spread out for tens of thousands of kilometers, enveloping the 4 ancient demons. Most of the ancient demons were only 300 or 3,000 meters tall, and as soon as they entered the Dharma idol, they couldn't do anything about it. Within the space of a few breaths, they were battered by the heavy water, and their bones were broken. Then, they were struck by lightning, and their blood qi was depleted. After about 10 breaths of time, they were reduced to ash. There were still a few ancient demons charging toward him, but when they saw what was happening, they didn't dare to provoke him. Instead, they scattered to the sides to find other opponents. Emodu's heart trembled. He had never imagined that Sun Jinren would be so powerful. If these ancient demons had attacked the state of Shenfang, they would have been able to wipe out the entire country. How could he have imagined that they would be killed so easily? The one charging toward Tao Jinren was a demon dragonfly. However, when it saw the countless flood dragons and heavenly cranes in the Dharma idol behind Tao Jinren, as well as the swirling yin and yang energies, it seemed to be very apprehensive. As it neared, it hesitated. Tao Jinren chuckled, then unfurled the primordial diagram of beasts and beasts. He waved his hand, and a sparkling, translucent toad leaped out. It inhaled a mouthful of spiritual energy, and immediately began to expand. Before long, it was 30,000 meters tall, and as its belly rose and fell, it caused the wind to howl. The demon dragonfly immediately felt fear. It knew that it wasn't his opponent, so it flapped its wings and fled backward. Tao Jinren tossed the captive essence pot into the sky. Several flood dragons flew out and turned into chains that fell down. With a clattering sound, he was locked up. Before he could use any magical power, his body was pulled into the pot. Even if two cultivators with the same cultivation base were to fight, if one side didn't have a protective magical treasure, he could only move around to find an opportunity to win. If one charged forward like this, he would only be at the mercy of others. At the same time, the people of the various heavenly abodes of the 9 continents also used their magical powers. The ancient demons that rushed over were either captured or killed, and their numbers were constantly decreasing. Although these demons also tried their best to kill, their methods were too simple, and their magical powers had been exposed during the attack of the Blood Soul Demon Head. No matter how hard they tried, it was of no use. The eldest young master's expression was extremely ugly. He didn't expect these extraterrestrial cultivators to be so powerful. If these foreign demon saints were all killed, then the remaining people wouldn't be able to stop them. At this moment, he had no choice but to act. He made up his mind and hissed, "All clansmen, listen to my order. Follow me to charge forward and kill them all." Chapter 1258. After the eldest child called out, all the demon sages on the mountain charged towards the sky. Seeing that he was leading the charge, all the people from the Mieming clan, including Shuaing, did not dare to stay where they were. All of them led their subordinates and flew into the sky, following behind him. For a moment, the shrouding white mountain was filled with demonic wind and blood chi. Even the blood spirits of the demons that were entangling with them were dispersed. Mengjin saw that the demons below had turned out in full force. He transmitted his voice and said, "That great sage Qing Pai will be watched by Hall Master Duzhen. Let us deal with him." All the perfected persons nodded in agreement. The eldest young master was only halfway there when the clouds around him swayed and he transformed into a phoenix with shimmering golden feathers. He spread his 9 pairs of wings and extended them for over 10,000 feet. His tail feathers danced in the air, creating a dazzling display of multicolored light. His appearance was extremely eye-catching, and it immediately caused countless demons and blood spirits to charge at him. However, he let out a ruthless roar, and his entire body was ignited with raging golden flames. These flames seemed to have some kind of mystical power, and before the demons and blood spirits could get close, they were burned away. The flames circled in the air for a while, and actually swept away all the demons within a radius of several thousand miles around him. His brothers and sisters knew that the great sage Qing Pai was watching from behind. They did not want to be outdone. They all revealed their original forms and displayed their respective supernatural powers. Suddenly, there seemed to be more than 20 balls of golden flames in the sky, killing all the demons outside and opening up a path for the demons behind them. Pan Yunxiang looked at these demon birds and said, "These demon birds look very beautiful and can even wipe out the demons. If I can catch one, I can use it to guard the cave abode." However, most of the bird demons here had a tyrannical and dirty aura. She had always liked cleanliness and did not want to touch them. Hence, her eyes wandered around, trying to find one that she liked. After the eldest child circled around, he flew up into the sky and let out another loud cry before diving down. At this moment, a Taoist among the perfected ones raised his hand. A cold sword light flew out. It chased after lightning and was extremely fast. Before the eldest young master could react, he was split into two halves by the sword light. But what was strange was that not a single drop of blood flowed out from its body. After a breath of time, scarlet light burst out from the two halves of its body and connected to another area. The wound closed up, and in an instant, it was as good as new. He flapped his wings again. Just as he was about to move again, he saw that there was suddenly a cloud of whistling turbid smoke below him. It was getting wider and wider. If he didn't change his direction now, he would definitely crash into it. He could sense an astonishing power within the mass of turbid chi, as if it could annihilate the life force of all living things. Under the condition that he could revert to his original form, his blood chi surged. His nature had already been stimulated. He was no longer as cautious as before. Instead, he had become extremely ferocious. He did not dodge or evade, and directly charged in. With a loud bang, he was blown into a cloud of ash the moment he came into contact with the black smoke. However, the strange thing was that even though his body had been destroyed, a strand of his vital energy hadn't dispersed. When this cloud of turbid smoke dissipated, the remaining ashes were blown by the wind. Suddenly, they gathered together again. After rolling a few times, they actually grew back flesh and feathers. In just a few breaths of time, this annihilation demon bird had reverted to its original form. A powerful demon exclaimed, "It's the 9 deaths, it's the 9 deaths transformation." The ancient demons behind were all excited. With such a sacred art, besides the great sage Qing Pai, no one could kill him. What did they have to be afraid of? The eldest young master could control all the demons. Being the eldest son of the great sage Qing Pai was only one of the reasons. The most important reason was that after he became an ancient demon, he had formed many exceptional techniques. One of them was the 9 deaths sacred art. It could condense a blood-concealing tail feather. As long as one wasn't too far away from the feather, no matter what kind of external attack one suffered, even if one's head was cut off or one's body turned to ash, as long as the feather wasn't destroyed, it could regrow. At this moment, this feather was beside the great sage Qing Ying. It was almost impossible to kill him directly. Sun Jiyan's interest was piqued when he saw his opponent's bravery, but when he saw the 5 thunder pot being smashed into pieces, he sneered and said, "This 5 thunder pot has some ability, come and have a taste of my 5 thunder pot." Just as he was about to take out his magic treasure, he heard a voice beside his ear. "Sun Jinren, since we can't injure this demon right now, there's no need to waste time with him. Wait until I take him to another domain and deal with his subordinates. It won't be too late to deal with him then." Sun Jian raised his eyebrows and stopped his actions. Relying on his sacred arts, the eldest young master didn't care about the sacred arts and Tao techniques that were aimed at him. Instead, he charged at them head-on. After a few times, the demon's morale increased and he was very pleased with himself. At this moment, seeing that his subordinates had almost caught up, he flapped his wings and charged towards where the Zhen masters were standing. He thought that this move would definitely force the cultivators from beyond the heavens to protect themselves. This way, his subordinates would be able to charge forward and disrupt the enemy's formation. However, when he looked over, he saw that the Zhen masters were standing there, not moving at all. There wasn't a hint of panic in their expressions, only indifference. He felt that something was wrong, but with his indestructible body, he didn't care too much about it. At this moment, a pagoda suddenly jumped out in front of him and blocked his path. He let out a roar and his blood rushed to his head. Just as he was about to charge forward, a ray of light fell from the top of the pagoda. Before he could react, he was hit by the light and disappeared in an instant. Qi Hongchan took out a spell and the hidden appearance pagoda turned into a ray of light and disappeared into his sleeve. The eldest young master was the commander in name at this moment. Seeing that he suddenly disappeared without a trace, the demons panicked. However, the elder in the eldest young master's formation was a sensible person. He said, "Everyone, don't worry. The eldest young master has an indestructible body. He's just temporarily trapped by the sacred art. I believe he'll come out in a while." When Shuang saw that the eldest young master was captured, she wasn't anxious at all. Instead, she became happy. Now that Yuchi was being chased and hiding far away, she had the strongest sacred art here. Thus, with a shout, she spread out the 8 pairs of wings on her body and flapped them, releasing rays of golden light. "Everyone, listen to my command." Pang Yunxiang searched for a long time but still couldn't find one that caught her eye. Although there were millions of annihilation bird demons here, the ones with pure auras were too weak. As for those with tyrannical blood and qi, most of them were unbearably filthy. At this moment, when Shuang jumped out, her eyes lit up and a ray of light shone on top of her head. Shuang only felt that under the ray of light above her head, there was an indescribable strangeness in her soul. However, after using her blood and qi a few times, she couldn't get rid of it. It was as if her body was covered in dust that she couldn't wash away. She couldn't help but be furious. Because she couldn't obtain the grass elves' ancestral spiritual root, she was dragged here. She already had a stomach full of resentment but nowhere to vent it. Now that she was stimulated by the ray of light, her eyes turned red. She let out a shrill scream and her body turned into a ray of light, heading towards Pang Yunxiang's direction. When everyone saw this, they knew that Zhenren Pang had taken a liking to this demon. However, there were many ancient demons here and there were many to choose from. Naturally, they wouldn't come and fight with her. Pang Yunxiang's expression was calm. She took out a jade plate and pointed at it with her finger. From her fingertip, a drop of blood fell and a ray of light appeared on the plate. The Inata Temple was good at subduing demons, but it didn't mean that they couldn't fight with others. Especially since he'd fought with the Devil Sect for 10,000 years, he possessed a unique ability in the defense and attack of the soul. On the other hand, even though the physical bodies of these demon birds were strong, they didn't have any way to protect their souls, so it was just right for him to make a move here and capture them. She picked up the jade plate and shone it in front of her. A shadow appeared in the light and it looked exactly like her. In a blink of an eye, it appeared in front of Shuang. Shuang was shocked. She opened her beak and spat out a stream of flame. However, this move was useless. The shadow was formless and the flame couldn't hurt it. It passed through it easily. Shuang was about to execute her other supernatural powers when the shadow smiled and gently pointed at the center of her brows. Shuang felt a roar in her head. When she looked again, she realized that she had fallen into an empty and dark place. She was shocked and looked around. She saw the female cultivator standing on a white lotus. Her body was enshrouded in light and countless mysterious talismans were dancing around her. She shouted angrily, "Where is this place? What have you done?" She didn't know the transformation of the soul and most of her spiritual wisdom was concealed by the secret technique of the Anata Temple. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to understand that she was in her own sea of consciousness. Pang Yunxiang didn't answer and only smiled. Under the white lotus, there was a tremor of thunder and lightning. Gradually, it turned into a sea of thunder that covered an area of 10,000 miles. As the tide moved, thunder and lightning surged up and down. The rumbling sound was endless. If the experts of the 9 continents were here, they would know that she was visualizing the pool of 10,000 refinements. No matter what kind of demon it was, they were all afraid of thunder. Although Shuang was the descendant of the demon ancestor, when she saw the mighty thunder tide, she instinctively wanted to retreat. In this sea of consciousness, any change in one's mind would affect oneself. Once this thought was born, it would be magnified and her aura weakened. How could Pang Yunxiang miss such an opportunity? In order to completely tame Shuang, she had sent a strand of her soul into this space. This was an extremely dangerous move. Once the demon reacted, it would not be easy to deal with it. She might even lose her life here. Pang Yunxiang made a hand seal and a vast wave of lightning surged towards Shuang. At this moment, outside, Shuang was stunned and motionless, as if she was hit by some supernatural power. The demons became chaotic again. In the annihilating bird tribe, the only one who could be considered competent was Yuqi. However, he was being chased by Sun Huang. Because his blood qi supernatural power was the art of flight and leap, he could temporarily save his life. However, he had no time to care about the demons. As the number of ancient demons in the field continued to decrease, the birds of annihilation in the sky also fell one by one. The situation was quickly getting out of hand. At this moment, a long cry suddenly came from Mount Concealed White. With this sound, a ferocious aura spread out. All the fiendish demons trembled and their eyes revealed fear. The elders of the annihilating bird tribe were pleasantly surprised. Their eyes were filled with fanaticism. It's the clan leader. The clan leader has woken up. As the aura was revealed, the huge hidden white mountain kept shaking. After a while, 23 sky-covering wings stretched out one by one and rose into the sky. The sky of the entire cold Jade Ocean continent suddenly darkened. Chapter 1259. As soon as the wings appeared, the people of the Mieming tribe were all excited and let out loud cries. For thousands of years, the great sage Green Melon had led them to battle everywhere. No matter how strong the enemy was, they all died under his divine abilities. Even the great sage Crooked Lotus, who had the divine ability 10,000 lives 1,000 years ago and was said to be undying and unending even in death, was defeated. It was just that after that battle, the tribe leader no longer showed his face. The matters of battle were all handed over to his children and tribe members. There were rumors that he was seriously injured and did not have long to live. But there were also rumors that he had obtained a spiritual item from the great sage Crooked Lotus and was refining his blood qi to return to the demon ancestor's body. And most of the ancient demons here knew that before the great sage Green Melon cultivated in seclusion, he only had 10 pairs of wings. But now, he had 23. It was obvious that in the past hundreds of years, his blood qi had become even stronger and was infinitely close to the demon ancestor of the past. At this moment, the perfected ones of the 9 continents all had serious expressions. Although the demon in the hidden white mountain had not come out, they could see the whole picture. Its aura was so strong that it was already above the ordinary people of the heavenly abode. At this point, it was not something that their divine abilities and Taoist techniques could hurt. Zhang Yan took a few glances at the concealed white mountain and raised his eyebrows slightly, as if he had noticed something. He pondered for a moment and said, "Shinran, there's no need to stop. This demon seems to be tied down by something and can't appear for a while. Let's get rid of the demons here first." He could sense that although the demon's aura was leaking out, it was not actually in the mountain and sea realm itself. Because of the deep connection between the mountain and sea realm, as soon as the demon's aura arrived, the image of a pair of wings could be seen. When the perfected ones heard his words, they immediately sped up. They no longer held back their strength and used all their divine abilities and magical treasures. How could the demons pull themselves together? The natural gap in strength could not be made up for immediately. It was like a small flame that had sprang up just now. In the blink of an eye, it was extinguished by the water. In the clear sky, a ferocious giant bird spread its wings, as if it wanted to fly up. However, there was a giant lotus below it, and countless roots wrapped around it, firmly holding it back. The lotus moved, and an old man's face appeared on its petals. With a hint of pleasure, he said, "I didn't expect that your annihilation bird tribe would be attacked one day, Qing Fu. With me here, don't even think about leaving." Great Sage Green Melon said indifferently, "Why should I go out? Chu Lian, this should be the amount of profound qi you've accumulated over the past hundreds of years, right?" Great Sage Crooked Lotus sensed something wrong from his tone. His heart skipped a beat. All of a sudden, Great Sage Green Melon stopped flying away. Instead, he turned around and grabbed the stem with his claws while his sharp beak pierced into the lotus bud. Great Sage Crooked Lotus screamed in pain. At the same time, he felt the essence chi that he had accumulated with great difficulty being continuously sucked away. He couldn't help but be shocked and angry. At the same time, there was also a trace of fear. Originally, if he had held his ground and not moved, it was impossible for Great Sage Green Melon to seize this opportunity. However, just now, in order to hold him back, he revealed a flaw. He said hatefully, "Green Melon, you still have the heart to scheme against me? Aren't you afraid that if you go out too late, all your clansmen will die?" Great Sage Green Melon said, "If he's dead, it means that he's useless. Since he's useless, why should I save him?" Great Sage Chu Lien said, "Think carefully. Many of them are your children." Great Sage Qing Ying's expression did not change as he said coldly, "I have no heirs. As long as I'm here, I'll just have more children. Why would he be afraid of Weiyou destroying the Ming clan? As long as I swallow your profound qi and combine it with the blood medicine, I can immediately grow that last wing. At that time, I won't have to be afraid of anyone." Great Sage Chu Lien said angrily, "Do you think you can do whatever you want to me?" However, after he said this, his heart moved and he was puzzled. Since Green Melon already knows that I'm accumulating profound qi, then he shouldn't have chosen this moment to attack. I still have ways to deal with him now, but after 100 years, he will become stronger and I won't be able to resist him. Wouldn't I gain more? Thinking about this, he gritted his teeth and said, "I know. There must be someone among the cultivators from beyond the heavens that you fear. That's why you're in a hurry to increase your strength. If you don't swallow my profound qi, you won't dare to go out. Am I right?" Great Sage Qing Ying said emotionlessly, "Unfortunately, it's too late for you to understand. If you didn't move just now, I wouldn't have gone out even if the Weiyou Ming clan was killed." Great Sage Chu Lien was also deeply regretful. If he could have kept his composure, he wouldn't have ended up like this. Unfortunately, after being trapped for nearly 1,000 years, he was already blinded by hatred. Now that he saw an opportunity, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He gritted his teeth and said, "How can I let you succeed so easily?" He shouted and actually sent more than half of his profound qi back. Great Sage Qing Ying was originally extracting the profound qi from the lotus and didn't expect to do this. He was caught off guard and his aura became a little chaotic. Chu Lien took this opportunity to disperse the rest of his profound qi into the countless roots. Great Sage Qing Ying also noticed this. He thought for a while and realized that if he wanted to find all the profound qi, he would have to search for them one by one. According to the number of roots, it would take at least 10 years. Unless he killed Great Sage Chu Lien, that would be easy. However, he still had a use for this demonic lotus and now was not the time to do this. He was also a person who could take things and let them go. He figured that the profound qi he had collected was just enough for him to grow his last wing, so he didn't force it. After absorbing all the profound qi into his body, he also swallowed the bloodstone that he had been holding in his throat all year round. In an instant, his body became incomparably hot. At the end of his tail, another wing was slowly growing out. At this moment, there were fewer and fewer demons on Mount Concealed White. Shui Dingyuan used his divine ability, and a beam of white light shone into the sky. The tens of thousands of demonic birds instantly lost their minds and fell to the ground. Reverend Wei released a brocade cloud and collected all of them. He thought to himself, "The mountain and sea realm is vast and boundless. With these tens of thousands of demonic birds, when my Origin Mirage School is established in the future, our disciples will no longer lack the strength to travel on foot." At this moment he thought of something else. He stepped onto the brocade cloud and came to Qi Hongchan's side. He cupped his hands and said, "Sect Leader Qi, I have a way to subdue that demonic bird. Why don't you release it now? It will save us a future trouble." Qi Hongchan changed his mind and said, "That's fine." Although he had moved the eldest young master into the realm of the hidden aspect spirit pagoda to be imprisoned, the demon was not weak. Trapping it inside would also consume his magic power. Besides, he didn't know if the greater demon, who had yet to fully appear, had a way to capture it. It would be best if he could deal with it sooner. He waved his sleeve, and a beam of light shone out. Although the eldest young master had been trapped in the void realm for less than an hour, the desolate feeling made him almost go crazy. Now that he was released, how could he care about fighting the enemy? He let out a wild roar and hurriedly flapped his wings to fly away, wanting to escape. Xue Dingyuan had soundlessly released a clump of sea serpent qi outside. If one's state of mind was unstable, or if one's emotions were fluctuating violently, the qi would immediately seep into one's spirit. If one didn't know how to neutralize it, they would fall into an illusion. The eldest young master didn't know the profoundness within. When he was agitated by the sea serpent qi, he lost his composure. In his eyes, many enemies suddenly appeared in front of him, and he rushed forward with a loud roar. The strange thing was, he didn't think about where these opponents came from, and didn't know why they wanted to fight with him. There was only one thought in his mind, and that was to tear them all into pieces and kill them. Xue Dingyuan saw that the eldest young master was gradually weakening, and knew that he had fallen into a deep dream. The most powerful thing about this technique was that it would cause one's heart to sink uncontrollably, and one wouldn't even want to wake up. He said, "This demon bird is the most powerful among the demons. It would be a pity to kill it. Why don't we hand it over to the three venerable ones?" Qi Hongchan said, "That's how it should be." At this moment, all the demons, including the remaining dozens of ancient demons, were wiped out. There were millions of demon birds in the Mieming tribe. Other than those that were killed during the battle, the rest were divided up by the venerable ones of the various sections. Even Gongxian Zhao, Mo Du, and the others took the opportunity to capture many. However, at this time, Great Sage Qing Pai still hadn't come out. Only his wings covered the sky, but after such a long time, not only did his aura not weaken, but it was also getting stronger. After another few hours, a green cloud appeared under the wings, and a giant claw reached out and grabbed the entire Miabai mountain. As the cloud slowly dissipated, the owner of the wings also revealed his true appearance. The venerable ones looked over and saw that it was a huge and majestic ferocious vulture. Its head was like a spiritual crown, bright red and eye-catching. The beard hanging down its chin was pure green, and its eyes were bright like the sun, illuminating the mountains and rivers. Its beautiful feathers were colorful, and the feathers on its tail were long. When it swayed gently, it brought with it the color of clouds and smoke. At this moment, its one foot was there, and its blood and qi were boiling. It was as if all the light in the world had gathered on its body, and no other light could be tolerated. Gongxian Zhao sighed. As expected of the bird of Mieming Ming. It is indeed a divine and mighty steed. When Xue Dingyuan saw it, his heart was slightly shaken. This demon bird was extremely similar to the one he saw in the illusion. Moreover, the wings that it revealed now were different from what he saw just now. There were not 23 wings, but one more, a total of 12 pairs. Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, and he said indifferently, "Great Sage Qing Pai, I've been waiting for you for a long time." The voice rumbled down and shook the mountains. Great Sage Qing Pai's fierce eyes turned and looked over, but when he saw it, he couldn't help but have his hair stand on end. Just now, he had already sensed the tyrannical strength of the enemy, but now that he saw it again, he felt even more fearful. He asked coldly, "You came from beyond the heavens, and I, the bird of Mieming Ming tribe, have never offended you. Why are you invading my territory with such great fanfare?" Zhang Yan said, "You can conquer others, so I can naturally conquer you." He looked up, and the divine light in his eyes was like lightning. "If you are willing to surrender, I can still call you fellow Taoist. If you are unwilling, there will be no need for you to destroy the Ming tribe today." Chapter 1260. When Gongxi Zhao, Mo Du, and the others heard Zhang Yan's words, their hearts shook. Although Zhang Yan's voice wasn't loud, behind his calm expression, there was no room for negotiation. It was as if the huge demon bird standing in front of him wasn't the ferocious great sage demon king that dominated the northern heaven-freezing abyss, but an insect that could be easily crushed. When they looked at the great sage Qing Pai again, he didn't speak for a long time, as if he was really weighing the pros and cons. They couldn't help but take a deep breath. Their eyes were filled with shock, and they vaguely understood that this person's magic power and divine abilities were probably even greater than what they'd expected. What made them even more afraid was that behind this Zhang Yan, there were also the sect leaders of the Qinsong and Shaoqing sections. The strength of these cultivators from beyond the heavens might be much greater than what they had imagined. Great Sage Qing Ying's eyes revealed a look of deep thought. When the heaven-patching formation was still outside the cold Jade Ocean region, he had used his abilities to check it out and knew that there were people that he couldn't defeat among the cultivators from beyond the heavens. He originally thought that after cultivating the 24 wings, he would be able to fight against them, but now that he looked at it again, he realized that he had underestimated them. Especially when he looked at the water wall around him, there was an aura that was above his, causing him to be unable to escape. It was obvious that the opponent's true strength wasn't limited to what he revealed on the surface. His chances of winning against them were too low. Thinking about this, he calmly said, "My Mieming clan's strength isn't enough, and we have no complaints when they come to us. My clan has fought for tens of thousands of years and has countless treasures. I'm willing to hand them over in exchange for my escape." To a demon with a long lifespan like him, who still had the potential to grow, he didn't care about temporary gains and losses. Not being able to defeat a strong enemy wasn't something shameful. If he could pay a price in exchange for a chance to escape, that would be the best. As for the items he took out, it could be seen as being deposited with the other party. As long as he went out, he could find a place to cultivate, then he could find a chance to kill his way back in the future. At that time, everything would still be his. Zhang Yan smiled faintly. After the cultivators of the 9 continents occupy the northern heaven-freezing abyss. What we need, like today, we can take it ourselves, there's no need for outsiders to give it to us. Great Sage Green Osmanthus refused to give up. He thought that it was just that his offer wasn't big enough to move his opponent, so he thought for a while and said, "In the northern heaven cold abyss, I know a few places where the demon ancestor hibernates. If we can get it out, I'm sure it will be beneficial to everyone." The demonic devils of the mountain and sea realm had reached the demon saint level, and were gradually becoming one with heaven and earth. If they returned to the demon patriarch's body, and were unable to break through that shackle, then they would be trapped here until they died. Almost no demon ancestor was willing to do this. Since the creation of the world, there were people who tried to break the restriction. He naturally had to go beyond the heavens, and if he failed, then he could only fall into a deep slumber to accumulate his vital energy and blood while waiting for the next opportunity. He said this partly to make an exchange, and partly to point out that there were people in this world who could fight against the extraterrestrial cultivators, but they had not woken up yet. It was not difficult to take precautions in advance, or take action first to eliminate hidden dangers. When Gongxi Zhao and the others heard this, they were shocked. They also knew a bit about this rumor. Although these demon ancestors were hiding underground, and although they were not a threat to the Eastern Wasteland human nation, there was no guarantee that they would wake up one day and come out to wreak havoc in the world. It would be best if they could get rid of them early. However, Zhang Yan was not moved at all. His face was calm. "I have already said that if the cultivators of the 9 continents want something, they will get it themselves." Great Sage Green Osmanthus's fierce eyes narrowed. "If my guess is correct, you and the other cultivators from beyond the heavens didn't come here to join forces with the human nation of the Eastern Wasteland to destroy my Mieming tribe, but to occupy this place and establish your foundation. But if I fight you here, not only Mount Hidden White, but also the frigid Jade Ocean continent." Zhang Yan said in a loud voice, "If the mountain collapses, it can be rebuilt. If the sea dries up, it can be rebuilt. Even if the frigid Jade Ocean continent is destroyed, the cultivators of the 9 continents have their own divine abilities to rebuild the mountains and rivers, to rebuild the continent." He was not boasting when he said this. The mountain and sea realm was much larger than the 9 continents. In comparison, the frigid Jade Ocean continent was only a small part of it. Even if the continent was destroyed, as long as the continent did not collapse, then the spiritual opportunity of the earth could be drawn from somewhere else to rebuild the mountains and rivers. Great Sage Green Osmanthus said coldly, "I have more than 100 divine abilities to destroy the Ming tribe. If we fight, you will not be able to escape unscathed. If you let me go, you might even benefit from it. You should think carefully about whether this is worth it." Zhang Yan was surprised. This demon was using words to threaten him, which showed that he was afraid. He said, "Great Sage Green Osmanthus, if you have nothing else to say, I will make my move." Hearing his tone, Great Sage Green Osmanthus knew that there was no way to talk. His eyes flashed with a fierce light. "Since a battle is unavoidable, then I will show you what I can do to destroy the Ming tribe." It roused the blood energy on its body, and its fierce eyes instantly turned scarlet red. However, it only blinked once. Boom! In the blink of an eye, all the spectators felt that all the light in the surroundings had suddenly vanished, and not even a trace of it remained. The heavens and the earth had fallen into an expanse of darkness. Great Sage Green Osmanthus had 24 wings, and he was not far from the lustrous brightness demonic ancestor. He could already use the most powerful divine abilities of the sun-extinguishing bird. And the divine ability he was using now was called Seizing White. According to the ancient legends, the sun-extinguishing bird fought with Bo Bai for the right to control the sun, but it was defeated. Hence, it swore to steal the spiritual light of the sun and moon, so that it could not shine into the world. Thus, this divine ability was born. Once this technique was used, the sky darkened when one opened his eyes, and the sky brightened when he closed his eyes. At present, although it couldn't do this, it was not difficult to take away all the light in the cold Jade Ocean continent. Not only that, even the people who were close to each other could not sense each other's existence. This feeling, in the eyes of the Taoist masters of the 9 regions, was as if they had returned to the void primordial sea. However, they did not panic because of this. Instead, they calmed their minds and stood motionless. Great Sage Green Osmanthus's fierce eyes flashed. He took this opportunity to flap his wings and crash into the wall of water. The fact that it was able to survive the battle of the demons in the northern cold abyss and make the Mieming tribe flourish and grow, it naturally had a vicious side to it. On the surface, it pretended to be ruthless, as if it wanted to fight to the death, but in reality, it was trying to find an opportunity to escape from this place. As long as he was outside, he was confident that with his flying ability, no one would be able to catch up with him. Moreover, he had already made up his mind to wake up the demon ancestors and work together to expel these extraterrestrial cultivators. However, just as it flew up, a black flame rose from within the darkness. After which, its body was struck by an unimaginably great force. Over half of one of its wings was broken as it violently smashed onto the ground. Great Sage Green Osmanthus was very surprised. He did not expect that there was still light that could not be penetrated by his magical power. He looked over and saw that Zhang Yan had already grown to a height of more than 10,000 feet. His entire body was shrouded in red and purple evil light, and he was walking over step by step. There was a trace of darkness in his eyes, and a mysterious fire was burning behind him. Within the fire, there seemed to be an illusory image of a demon god, driving away all the darkness in the surroundings. He reached out and grabbed a spear of evil chi from the black fire. He threw it casually, and it suddenly shot out. Great Sage Green Osmanthus's fierce eyes were red, but he did not dodge. Instead, he raised his wings high and spat out a mouthful of golden flames. In the next moment, the evil chi spear pierced into his body and was driven by the huge force attached to it. After crashing into several mountains, it was fiercely nailed to the ground. At this moment, the golden flames had also rushed to the front of Zhang Yan. With a wave of his sleeve, a boundless evil chi swept across and dispersed the flames. He did not stop and continued to walk forward. Great Sage Green Osmanthus let out a shrill cry and shattered the evil chi spear. He then flapped his wings and flew up. In the blink of an eye, he rushed to the front of Zhang Yan and clawed down with his sharp claws. Zhang Yan raised his arm to block the claws. Then, he suddenly stretched out his other hand and clasped the neck of the great sage green osmanthus. After breaking the neck, he ruthlessly smashed it onto the ground. A loud sound was heard. One could feel that the entire ground under his feet sank because of the impact. If the body was really big to a certain extent, then ordinary magical power might not necessarily be more powerful than a punch or a kick. At this moment, both of their bodies were huge, so every movement had the power to shake the mountains and rivers. If there was an ancient demon or great mystic cultivator standing nearby, they would also be easily shaken to death. In a battle like this, there was no room to dodge. It all depended on which side had the strongest body and which side had the strongest magical power. Great Sage Green Osmanthus's blood and chi surged and his injuries were all healed. Seeing that he could not suppress his opponent head-on, he used the space warping technique and instantly escaped tens of thousands of miles away. Zhang Yan's gaze spun as he utilized the eye of the sun and moon, and it instantly froze him in place for an instant. In the next moment, he'd already torn space apart and arrived close to Qinshi before smashing his fist forward. Boom! The evil chi rumbled past and Great Sage Green Osmanthus was smashed into pieces of flesh and blood. The land within thousands of miles was dyed red. However, in just an instant, his body reformed. As the leader of the Mieming tribe, he also had the 9 deaths technique. However, because he had almost returned to the body of a demon ancestor, his magical power was much more profound than that of the eldest young master. The blood-concealing feather was placed somewhere in the northern heaven-chill abyss. As long as he didn't find it and destroy it, he wouldn't be able to kill it completely. Because of this, he didn't fear death when he fought. When facing an opponent of similar strength, he didn't even need to use other methods. Just this magical power and the strength of his body would usually be enough to drag the opponent to death. Even Great Sage Crooked Lotus, who was known to be endless, couldn't outlast him. A dark light flashed in Zhang Yan's eyes. Just now, he saw that the eldest young master used this technique. Even the 9 continents' heavenly demons had indestructible bodies. How could he not be prepared? Because he suspected that there were such demons in New Heaven, he cultivated a magical power from the demon-subduing scroll that could counter this technique. Thus, his spiritual will moved along with his magical power. The demon form behind him grew larger and gradually became more solid. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.